This week, we welcome Philip Niedermair, CEO of the National Security Group, to talk about the National Cyber Education Program. In the second segment, we welcome back Josh Abraham. He's a staff engineer at Praetorian. He was on Enterprise Security this week talking about the MITRE ATT&CK framework for defenders. He comes on Paul's Security Weekly today to talk about the MITRE ATT&CK framework for attackers. In the security news, Tenable experts have found 15 flaws in wireless conferencing systems. Julian Assange refuses exfiltration to the U.S., or extradition, I guess we should say. Proof of concept exploits for SAP flaws are now at risk of attack, and it's interesting as to why. $1.7 million was stolen from a church through phishing, and marijuana as a religion. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Is your IT team ready to face the next implementation or upgrade? Do you have a pool of talented team members who are trained and ready to support your organization's growth? The right IT skills development platform can get you past the IT skills gap. With training content that's so engaging, some even call it binge-worthy learning, your team will watch and learn more with IT Pro TV. Get a free team trial of IT Pro TV today. Visit securityweekly.com/IT Pro TV. Thinkst Canary makes high-fidelity honeypots that set up in minutes and requires no ongoing administration. Attackers moving silently on your network advertise their presence by tripping over them. There's a good reason Thinkst Canaries are deployed and loved by some of the best security teams in the world. They're inexpensive, they're simple, and they work. For more information, go to securityweekly.com/canary or direct message @ThinkstCanary on Twitter.
And welcome to the show, where sometimes folks just come and go. But first, let me introduce you to a man who also likes to come and go, Praetorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 602. We're recording on May 2nd, 2019, at G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, the illustrious Mr. Larry Pesci.
The illustrious?
Yes, you are illustrious.
I have a luster to me?
Yeah, your beard is very lustrous.
Beardy.
Lustrous.
Beardy.
Yes. On the lines, remotely, Mr. Lee Neely from the flyover state is here with us. What's going on, Lee?
Not much. Love being the flyover state because Idaho is full. If you want to live in Idaho, it's spelled IOWA.
It's filled,
Nice.
filled with potatoes. That's what I thought you were. Mr. Joff Fire is on the lines remotely. Joff, welcome.
I'm glad to be here. I'm really love that you said the flyover state. So apparently there's only one, which is fantastic, I suppose.
No, I guess there's more than one. One of the, I should have said, Joff.
Yeah, but the other thing I loved is that we have Julian Assange refusing to be exfiltrated.
That's what the teleprompter said. We just continue to screw up that story. And, I mean, why break tradition at this point?
Burgundy reads whatever's on the teleprompter.
That's right. Joff, what is your shirt made out of? Oh, never mind.
My shirt is made out of hemp. And we have a hemp story tonight.
And we have it's almost like we planned that, but we really didn't. So
no, we didn't.
A couple of quick announcements. Register for our upcoming webcast with Observe It and Kaseya by going to securityweekly.com/webcasts. If you missed any of our previous webcasts, you can go to securityweekly.com/webcast. I think I put the link there. If I didn't, it's /on demand. But I want everyone to go to securityweekly.com/webcast because I learn stuff on our webcast, so I'm thinking that our listeners do as well. And so we can all learn together. It's going to be fun. Our guest for this segment is Philip Niedermair, the CEO of the National Cyber Group. The NCG's mission is to develop and launch educational programs inspiring students at all levels, creating awareness of job opportunities, providing students with skills immediately applicable to the cyber workforce, and connect students to careers. Philip, welcome to the program this evening.
Thank you indeed. It's a privilege to be here. It's a great mission we're taking on, and certainly we appreciate the fact that you are giving us an audience to speak to. We can share the information and build our network.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Philip, how did you get involved with the National Cyber Group?
So the National Cyber Group was formed. It's a partnership between Discovery Education and ourselves, and we formed the company about 6 months ago. As it happens, Ron Gula, one of the founders of Tenable, who you mentioned in your opening remarks, helped to put the company together as well. His wife, Cindy, is on our advisory board. For the last 10 years, I've been involved in the intelligence community, supporting a variety of missions, mostly in an unofficial capacity, connecting into the private sector, academia, and across different agencies. And our journey really began about 3 years ago. And it first began because we hosted Discovery Education at a baseball game. A dear friend of mine, who happens to be the mother of Michael Phelps, Debbie Phelps, asked if I could give her access to our law firm's suite at the Orioles game. And we let her use the suite, and she was hosting a bunch of educators because she is the chair, or the executive director, of the Baltimore County Education Foundation. And we met these wonderful group of educators who included the leadership of Discovery Education. And candidly, I had no idea that Discovery currently serves 30 million children of K through 12 age groups and 3 million educators by providing them with the technology and the content, partially inspired because of the Discovery Channel's huge, enormous log of different great programming to all of these schools, full curriculum programming and specialized programming, including the Lockheed Martin Space Camp and others.
That's really
so.
Awesome.
That was how it began. We began a discussion with them about two major issues that I thought were important. One was to share the mission of the National Cryptologic Museum, and we went and met with their leadership. I brought the Discovery Education folks with me, and also to take on the opioid crisis. So 3 years ago, that was how we began this journey. It happened that it wasn't the right time to begin telling the National Cryptologic Museum story at the NSA for a lot of reasons. And my dear friend Dick Schaefer decided to wait until we had more time past the Snowden crisis, candidly. But the DEA and the DOJ came together as a partnership and worked with Discovery Channel to create Operation Prevention, which is currently a causal-based curriculum available to all of the schools in America. And we have over 5 million young men and women, grades 5 and on, who are actively involved in Operation Prevention and learning about the opioid crisis and learning to have the tools to be able to defend themselves from people who want to offer them illicit drugs. So Philip, that's how we began this.
Yeah.
And then about 18 months ago, I was having dinner with Admiral Studeman at the Joint Services Academy Cyber Summit, which is a summit held between the Naval Academy, the Army Cyber Institute. I chair the Army Cyber Institute's outreach committee and help them run their CyCon Global Cyber Conference, and also the Air Force Academy and the Coast Guard Academy. And Admiral Studeman and I were having a chat about, why was I there? Why was I at this conference? And I explained to him that I worked on two primary things. One, infrastructure, because we have a project called Jack Volcaic at the Army Cyber Institute. Our last episode of Jack Volcaic was when we took over the city of Houston, and we had almost 400 people in their command center last July. And we did a mock double cyber attack corresponding with the hurricane. And it was a big success. The mayor was very happy with it. It's available online, our results. I was telling him about this exercise. AECOM funded that exercise for us, primarily, a couple of other sponsors too. And I helped arrange that. And I was telling him about that. And then I said, I also do a little bit of education. And he said, Philip, as he pointed his finger at me, and he said, you should focus on education. If we don't fix education, our infrastructure will not matter.
I agree.
And this was a big issue. And I didn't mean to give you a big dog and pony show and sort of a dog and pony story to lead into this, but we are facing a crisis in education because how bad is it? There are virtually no science teachers left in our middle schools and high schools. Science teachers are now also called gym coach and home ec teacher, and that isn't a degradation of them and their roles. But the reality is that our science teachers no longer teach in middle schools and high schools, so we have no inspiration for kids to participate in engineering, science, and the STEM subjects. And in addition, of course, we don't have any cybersecurity teachers. In fact, it's so bad that I heard this statistic from Maryland. In Anne Arundel County, where there are 6,600 public school teachers, they only have 10 qualified science teachers in their entire network.
Whoa.
And that
That's
statistic
emblematic
is
of the entire country.
And that statistic is common across the entire U.S.?
Absolutely.
Wow. That explains some.
Now, when I think about this, that I know that when you say qualified to teach science in that type of area, I know that there are people teaching science. Does that mean that they're not qualified to teach science, yet they are?
So they have their teacher certificate and they follow the curriculum to the best of their ability.
Got it. But they didn't specifically
I
study
respect their efforts. Don't get me wrong. But what we've got to understand is that people who tend towards the sciences, obviously the gifted ones, they're going to go there anyway. But we have to inspire others to be engineers. You know, our enemies, specifically China, are producing more PhDs than we're producing bachelor's degrees in science subjects because of the numbers.
Right. It's interesting in my own experiences with my children, and Larry, I believe you're in the same camp. Science and technology are something they learn from mom and dad.
Yeah.
In our homes, not necessarily from school. We supplement, I think, the school curriculum and build upon it, and even jump ahead. I'm like, what do you mean you haven't studied any physics or planets or the solar system? I'm like, all right, let's go to the whiteboard.
Arguably, our particular school system is arguably one of the best in the state, but they do have some really great science and STEM programs. So that's a little bit of a difference. But so I maybe not find as money as some others do, but it's definitely noticeable.
Yeah, Philip, you were saying that Discovery Education is providing the curriculum. What I found that almost it has to accompany the curriculum is training for the teachers, and there are some efforts in that area. But if you could speak to that.
Yeah, so in the Discovery platform, they teach through technology, so web, screen in classroom, an app, and the teachers become coaches because, of course, the teaching is coming from experts, world-renowned experts in whatever subject matter it is, and then it's delivered, and then they provide a classroom plan. So it's very well thought out.
I like that model.
Extremely creatively done.
Yeah, because that model can scale, right? Because the way I always thought of it was we need to train the teachers, but if there's not enough teachers and they don't have enough time or resources to train, in your model it scales much faster and much better.
Right. So we can scale. Our plan is that we are raising $25 million. We're going to offer this entire program to all the schools in the country for next 3 years for free. We are partnering with a huge range of very capable people. And we are collaborating closely with the National Security Agency and other agencies and private sector companies. I literally just got off the phone with North Dakota, who have a developed cybersecurity K through 12 curriculum, and then we'll be partnering with them as well. And of course, North Dakota has an advantage. They have big spaces, but not that many people.
Right.
Well, we've got lots of people to teach. And the challenge we face is this huge job gap. So I love America, and I love this country. It's the greatest nation on earth, and we need to protect it because it is the beacon of hope for the rest of the world. And if we do not protect it and provide ourselves and our people with the resources to defend the future is the Internet of Everything, we need to have enough people to man the virtual walls so that we can defend ourselves, because our society of convenience is not going to change. We are only going to depend on the Internet of Everything even more. So we need to have the resources to defend those virtual walls, and that will require educated people who understand what cybersecurity is and inspired to participate in it as well. We are already serving those who have a natural interest in it. But cyber jobs are not just about coding. I will tell you, I'm not a technical person. I'm a strategist. I've helped build big platforms across the world and in the US for different things. And what we need to do is make people understand the need, make them understand what the different job opportunities are. And also, we have to invigorate them to participate.
Agreed. I'm struggling how to structure this question without offending anyone, but we've all read articles about millennials and Generation Z and their kind of work ethic and overall outlook on life. Is that something that, when we look at some of the negative portrayals of those generations, that we can fix with education?
Well, in my opinion, it certainly is. And my opinion is much higher of millennials than you described, I would tell you. I'm largely inspired by them. I think their call to service is generally as big as it's ever been in our nation's history, other than when we've had crises like wars. And I find that they're creative and hardworking. You need to inspire them and allow them to participate in a way that's going to make it valuable for them and valuable for you. So I'm actually far less negative about that. I think, like Warren Buffett also thinks, this is again, we're facing a time where we're going to need the greatest generation. And I think this could be it.
Did technology work to our disadvantage to create those situations that are coming into that generation that's coming into the workforce today? And what can we do with technology to inspire rather than essentially make people lazy, is what, largely some of the opinions are?
So if you look at what has occurred, we're still teaching in the classroom the same way we did 50 years ago. And yet people have so much more access to distraction and information. Yeah. And they're one and the same thing. Mm-hmm. So what we need to do is harness that and deliver education in a way that's comfortable for the new generations. And what they're comfortable with is not necessarily having a teacher rotely repeating the same classes in front of them the way they've done for the last 50 years, but they should be inspired. I want to create, and I will create with Discovery Education, with the guidance of many other people and an advisory board, to ensure that we're meeting the needs of private sector and our government and military requirements, so that we have the Shark Week of cyber education, but also inspire them to participate in a more broader context in STEM. If you look at it, cyber is a subject of STEM. And what we want to do is give them a target to inspire them, and then teach them more broadly on STEM, on artificial intelligence, on robots, and so on. All of the forthcoming innovations that will make us the leading edge of the future for the world.
Yeah, I feel like we've lost a sense of building and engineering. And, my wife is an ultrasound sonographer. She was first an X-ray technician. It's interesting how even that's changed. Before, you had to get your X-ray certification, schooling, and then you could apply to ultrasound school. Now, kids can come out of college and go right into ultrasound school, not having those fundamentals of human anatomy, which puts them at a great disadvantage. Makes me kind of nervous. But in X-ray school, my wife says the hardest part that we had was in physics class, where we had to build an X-ray machine. And I feel like through education, we need to inspire folks to build and engineer things more so than we're doing today. Do you agree, Philip?
I completely agree, and that's part of our platform. The entire Discovery platform is one of inspiration. They have a saying about the teachers who love their programs. They call them their crazies. The teachers love it. Why? Because they're able to focus on individual coaching of students rather than just standing up in front of that classroom repeating that same syllabus that they've done for 8 years in a row. So they can leave that piece to the technology, which will deliver it in an exciting, dynamic way, and then focus on coaching the student so that they can use the learning from the lessons to the best of their ability and gain from it so that it can add to their lives and they can participate in the next stage in their education and going to school.
You know, what's interesting, Philip, is you really kind of highlighted the difference between traditional teaching and coaching. And it's very different. And I think of the way that you would teach a class traditionally and the way that I coach, Little League, if I'm coaching Little League, it's very different. In a coaching environment, you're letting the students or team members learn a kind of the way they learn, right? They're struggling with one thing, you may have them do a specific drill. If they're struggling with another thing, it might be a different drill for that person in a slightly different way. In teaching, like, everyone gets the same drills, and that's not applicable. In your model, is that like one of the goals, is to let people learn the way they learn, because we all learn differently?
The entire Discovery platform focuses on pedagogical development for individual students so that they can learn at their own pace.
It's fantastic.
And it really does work. Not only does it work in a general capacity, so students who are good students tend to do better. Average students do well. They stay about the same, interestingly enough. But the weaker students, particularly minorities, and in the sciences, we have to address the gender gap, which is a massive issue, especially in cyber. And girls participating in the Discovery platform in STEM education also outperform in tests they've done over whole states. I mean, there are obviously going to be individual areas where these numbers haven't been successful. So.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research to support that. Alice.org was a research project that I believe came out of Carnegie Mellon and proved that females actually learn better in an engineering setting when there's some type of gamification of that. So, yeah, you're absolutely on the right track. Sorry, Lee, did you have a question, comment?
So, as I was sitting here listening to the program and all the neat things, I'm thinking, there's got to be people listening to us are saying, like, we don't have this. How the hell do we get in on this action?
That's a good question.
Thank you for that. I'm glad I sent you the $10 earlier. We are, my great dear friend and the inspiration, much of my inspiration in cybersecurity is Lieutenant General Rhett Hernandez. General Hernandez stood up Army Cyber Command at a critical time in our nation's history. And it is said of him that he took the equivalent of the Niagara Falls of data and put it through 7 straws. He's retired now and is the chair of the Army Cyber Institute at West Point. And, when you're dealing with people like him and being inspired by him, you feel very fortunate. So if people want to reach out to us, what General Hernandez says we are doing is we're building a constellation of capabilities to meet the needs of the nation. And I love that term. A constellation, meaning a broad spectrum of resources and people and things, companies and government agencies, so we can address this needs together. If you look at back in history, and those that know American history, Roosevelt convened the War Cabinet in 1940 to begin the planning of the Second World War. And 2 of the major crises he faced was building a lot of big ships. And the second crisis he faced, which was even more difficult, was to create an entire new industry in aerospace. And we literally did not have one in 1940. There was just the very burgeoning of it. And we had less than 1,000 pilots. And he developed, and between them, they developed a test, and they developed a dynamic plan working with lots of different small startups so that they could build an aerospace industry that ended up tactically winning the war. It was air power that made the dynamic difference in the Second World War. So we face that same crisis today, and I invite people to reach out to us and help. The National Cyber Group is available on the web. You can look us right up. You can reach me at pnid@natcybergroup.com, natcybergroup.com. And I'm sure if you reach out to the folks who run this wonderful webcast, perhaps they could even relay your information to me if that would be okay.
Absolutely.
But I'd be happy to get your help. We need to have a concerted effort to change the dynamics of how education is taught in the classroom. K through 12, of course, but really in the later grades. K through 12, we say in our information, because 3-year-olds are touching devices. They're on phones. And so we want them to provide them the basic cyber citizenship awareness. Rob Joyce put it perfectly when I presented this idea to him at a bar after he had spoken. At the time, he was the president's advisor on cyber. He's a very fine guy, a senior executive at the NSA. I said, Rob, I have this idea. I'd like to build a platform. I described it to him as an overview in detail. And he said, Philip, what you're creating is cyber education for the masses. It's exactly what we need. And we have gone about doing that. We're very fortunate. We've been helped greatly. We were endorsed formally by the White House in December. We're working with them closely to build this platform to serve the nation's needs. And please reach out to us if you have ideas, resources, guidance, and counsel to assist us.
Philip, there's one topic where many of us in the security community and my friends that I speak with, we seem to have very different opinions about when we introduce and teach programming or software engineering. I'm of the opinion, self-serving, that we should introduce it as early as possible. In my experience, working with my own children and kids in our community, when I whiteboard stuff out or write it on a napkin at a restaurant and introduce coding, in early elementary grades, they seem to really get it, right? Now, there are others that say they're going to learn that inherently. We should focus on social skills and letting them play and all that stuff. And there are others that say we should introduce that later in a more formal setting. Philip, what's your kind of thoughts on when we introduce coding skills?
So first and foremost, I must say I'm not a technical person. I'm a strategist that focuses on large projects and bringing together teams to solve problems. I'm very fortunate to have great advisors in this, both from a pedagogical standpoint and the technical standpoint in cyber. One of the things we want to emphasize is that you don't need to code to join and become part of the cyber community. In fact, about 85% of our jobs don't involve any type of coding. Far more analysis is necessary and problem solving. We do believe that coding can start at an early age when it's appropriate. We also believe that problem solving is the key. Instilling the concepts of problem solving is really the key to our industry. And we will begin telling those stories and encouraging participation in that realm and in those topics rather than the very technical matters. We also think, to a certain extent, the gifted and talented naturally have an affinity to be drawn to our industry in these regards, in coding and so on. So we don't want to focus too much on that area, though we do need to develop it, particularly for those who aren't in areas of the country or in zip codes that have access to either the internet or technical teaching. And we know that there are very gifted people who are missed, and we want to be able to identify them as part of our plan.
Philip, how do we bridge the gap with engineers today, specifically software engineers as an example? And I'll fast forward to college when students are graduating from college with degrees in engineering or software engineering, and there's a couple of problems there. One, there's not enough of those students graduating in the U.S. to fulfill the demand. I think, two, when they do graduate, they're at a very high salary level than compared to lots of other fields and even positions in technology, making it hard to acquire talent within the U.S. For those two reasons, many U.S. companies, typically larger ones, will go overseas to recruit this talent. How do we bridge that gap so there's more engineers at an affordable rate for smaller, medium-sized businesses?
So I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head of why we believe the National Cyber Education Program is critical. It's the target. Cyber is the target, but in a broader context, we want more technology to be taught in the schools. So we have a greater pipeline created to meet the future needs of the nation. And if we do not do that, we'll be able to compete in some regards, but will we be able to compete as effectively or as efficiently as we would be able to if we had more participants in those industries. We have to inspire, invigorate, and create them by building a bigger pipeline and encouraging more children, more students, more young students to participate in those industries. They have to understand that the access points, and they have to understand what those type of careers are, because often they're misunderstood.
Mm. Go ahead, Joff.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Philip. So having brought my kids through school, my kids are in their young 20s now, but I was dismayed at the lack of STEM and the lack of emphasis there. Having grown up in Australia, it's very, very different. There's a very strong emphasis in STEM subjects. So my question to you is this: with your organization and what you're working with, how are we going to change the situation at the ground floor? And let me qualify the question. We have significant local community downward pressure on salaries for teaching staff, and you're not going to be able to get somebody like me to go into a elementary school or a secondary school and teach very high quality STEM-based cyber information. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we get talent at the level where the kids are in the school so that we can
chicken and egg problem.
build the pipeline appropriately? Because there's a lot of politics there, and I just wonder how you're engaging on that particular issue.
Yes, let me address that specifically. And the beauty of the platform that we built with the National Cyber Education Program, partnered with Discovery, addresses this exactly. Because we are not needing to have qualified science or cyber or technology teachers in the classroom. A screen will be in the classroom with perhaps even you, Josh, broadcast nationally teaching a particular topic or commenting on a particular topic. That screen will be enhanced by a curriculum that's properly pedagogically developed to meet that type of subject matter delivery. It will be further enhanced by two other factors: a coach, a teacher who cares and is properly nurtured to be able to coach the subject, but not teach the subject. And they're very different matters. Mm. And then lastly, we're going to engage with the private sector and with academia, so that in the private sector, we will have real live vignettes talking about the industry on a broader context, telling stories that have relevance to the kids, that are exciting and interesting and not boring. I mean, in the technology community, as you may be aware, cyber people say an outgoing cyber person looks at someone else's shoes. And that's about as exciting as they get. All right. So we have many people in cyber who aren't terribly focused on anyone else but their own product, their own problem. It's not a negative on them. I love them and I'm deeply engaged with the community, but it's a reality that we have to deal with. And some of my dearest friends have been very important within the community, both the private sector and so on. If we replace the teaching component with screens and then we enhance it with the private sector in-class visits and inspiration, telling real-life scenarios of why this industry is so critical, why we have to look at cyber as the defense not only of our credit cards, but of our culture going forward, because it is the new, it's a new paradigm that we have to address.
I think some of the resistance or hesitancy to get into an engineering field, what I sometimes come back to is a lot of that is driven by fear. The reason you don't do something or don't engage with something or take a risk is largely because of fear. Is there not just lack of or not enough awareness about engineering fields? Is there a fear component to it when you're in an educational environment to getting into education as well, Philip?
So, I mean, if you consider over the last 30 years, the degradation of the education community, teachers do their very best. I know many teachers. I coached for many years myself. I worked with middle school and high school students in America. I did not attend an American high school. I went to a boarding school in Scotland. I was very fortunate to have great teachers. However, what we've seen over the years is that the classroom has changed here, but we haven't shifted to take advantage of the technologies we have created in order to deliver education in a different way. We need to utilize those technologies so that teachers are more inspired and kids are more willing to participate. And I think that if you consider the fact that there are so few science teachers, why would weaker students or less talented students in science or computer or engineering feel comfortable with participating when the teacher is often not that comfortable with the topic themselves?
Yeah, that's a great point.
They're teaching subject matter that isn't that comfortable for them. They're doing their very best. They've picked up the mantle when someone else couldn't do it because there was a shortage. And I respect them immensely. But we still haven't solved the problem.
Yeah,
the problem is to inspire the kids and get them to participate. Even when they aren't the best and the most talented, they could still do the work and they could still learn to love it and enjoy it.
Yeah, and you're right, Philip. You know, when I think kids look at technology and they're using an iPad or, you know, navigating your entertainment device, whatever that is, which is more and more a computer today, right? And if you were to tell them that they could create that, I think many of them would be like, what do you mean? Like that would just be like the fear would set in instantly because it would look like an insurmountable task. Unless, as Philip, you said, they had a coach that said, no, like you can create that. Like, here's how you can do like a piece of that. And like, see, you can just start building on that. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So important to understand, if I may just interject, is our plan is for an initial 3-year rollout. We'll serve all the schools in America. We plan on initially serving 30 million kids K through 12 with a focus on grades 5 through 12. And during the initial launch, we're going to have a fast track for grades 9 through 12 because obviously they aren't getting the prep material that the kids in the future will. But we desperately need them to be engaged in our community and our industry. In years 4 and 5, we will have developed across the country 3 million educators who will have become capable and comfortable coaches of cyber and STEM topics. Our plan at the National Cyber Education Program through the National Cyber Group and in partnership with Discovery Education will be then to offer those teachers a roadmap so that they can become qualified as teachers in cyber as well. And we will provide that to those 3 million teachers for free. And we hope that at least 10% of them will participate. And if they do, we will have 300,000 more cyber teachers qualified and ready to inspire the kids.
It's awesome. Joff?
I love, I just wanted to make that one comment that, and I appreciate your response from my earlier question, and that is, you appear to have mechanisms in place to attempt to scale out and serve the need with the limited talent resource pools that we have, which I think is a critical component of actually getting there, because you cannot expect that the teachers in the schools to immediately be qualified, but if you set them on a path and scale them out with appropriate connections to other resources, it looks like this can really happen, which is really, really great to hear.
Well, it not only will really happen, but it must happen. We have no choice. The alternative is we don't have enough people to man the virtual walls to defend our nation, to defend the culture that we enjoy every day. And that the reason we came here, you and I, both foreigners, grew up in other countries and love this country, is because of the freedom that it has to offer. Yes, It has many faults and there are things we need to work on. Don't think I'm naive. But there is so much opportunity here. And we must instill within our youth the fact that they can achieve anything that they set their minds to. And in order to do that, we must provide them the tools. And that a large focus of that must be within STEM and within creative thinking and within problem solving.
Couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. More questions for Philip?
What do you think's the biggest barrier to entry? I'll say that again. What do you think the biggest barrier to entry? What's going to be your biggest hurdle to overcome?
So the biggest barrier to entry is the mindset that it can't be done, because we have been trying to fix this problem for a decade. And really, this is the right time at the right place with the right resources and the right team. I am experienced in taking on national and global challenges that are odd and challenging. And this is perfect for me. And it just happens that Discovery Education was introduced to me by Debbie Phelps, my dear friend, and Michael's mom, famous swimmer. Michael is as great as he is because of Debbie. She's an amazing human being, and she runs this education foundation. And we built this platform called Operation Prevention, which is already achieving success in a cultural-based education need and requirement in the schools. Now we've got an opportunity to take the resources that I have access to, Discovery Education, a successful company with Discovery Channel 2, they're teamed, of course, and to build a platform of cyber education that has STEM components to educate kids across the nation so that they can participate in our industry and help to defend this great nation and the culture that we love so much.
It's awesome. Philip, anything else you want to share with our audience?
No, I just want to thank you for your time. I encourage everybody who's watching us this evening or in the future as they download it, to reach out to us. We've hosted probably 8 or 10 conference calls over the last several weeks as we've gone beyond our soft launch that we had. We had hundreds of people on those phones from a variety of sources across the country, large companies and small companies. There's a place for everyone to participate in our constellation as we build it, and we welcome your guidance and counsel to assist us in achieving this great and important mission.
Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly, Philip? It's something that every guest that comes on the show answers the same 5 questions.
5 questions. Go ahead.
I'll alleviate your fears and say there are no right answers, there are no wrong answers, there are just answers. And one of the questions is multiple choice with only 2 options. So, Philip, 3 words to describe yourself.
Oh, 3 words to describe me? Mm-hmm. Thought you were going to give me, I thought it was multiple choice.
No, just one. That's not the question. That's multiple choice.
It is multiple choices, just lots of choices.
Multiples of choices.
It used to be driven, passionate, and energetic. But more recently, I'm driven, passionate, and caring because I'm in the education environment,
Very nice. If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Oh, a baseball bat. It's a fabulous thing.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Think first, run fast, talk less.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
I don't know the game. I'm from Scotland, so I don't know what Ask Grabby Grabby is. So I defer to you to try and tell me what I should be saying.
See, and we've been telling it's been significantly more popular in Europe for years. Apparently, we're mistaken.
Right? Scotland's Europe. Is that considered Europe? Not
but
really.
I love that answer though.
Yes,
that's right.
I avoided it well, did I not, my Australian friend there?
Yes, you did. Well done.
I think the answer.
A lot of factors go into.
So for the audience, my father was an American who served in the Second World War and in the Korean War, and was a great inspiration to me. My mother was a Highland Scot, and I was raised there, but have been living here for 30 years.
So that said, if we had to answer for him, I think the answer is yes.
Yes. Agreed. The last question is, choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise?
Oh, my. 2 celebrities to be my parents. Well, I think Doris Day was a lot of fun. Oh, gosh, who said, not in my cold, dead hands, the former head of the NRA.
Charlton Heston?
Charlton Heston.
Yes.
Yeah. Charlton Heston and Doris Day. What a combination, eh?
Wow.
Fantastic. Awesome. Philip, thank you so much.
How did I do?
You did fantastic.
Do I win a prize?
You got 100. You got 100.
So look, I appreciate you allowing me to interject on your show today. It was a privilege. And I thank you for what you're doing in informing our community in such a jocular way, in such a lively way, in such a dynamic way. I hope you invite me back.
Absolutely.
Because we have a lot of important work to do, and I'd certainly love to help you in any way I can as well.
Well, open
Thank
invitation, to have yourself or others on this subject come back on the show and talk about it. Philip, you in my opinion, are a fantastic leader, and we're happy that you're leading this initiative because we feel it's very important as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
With that, we're going to take a short break. Come back. Joshua? I call him Josh, or Jabra, really. Josh Abraham, a.k.a. Jabra, is going to come on the show, talk about the MITRE attack framework for attackers. Stay tuned.
Organizations' internal networks are overly permissive and can't distinguish trusted from untrusted applications. Attackers abuse this condition to move laterally through networks, bypassing address-based controls to spread malware. Edgewise abstracts security policies away from traditional network controls that rely on IP addresses, ports, and protocols, and instead ties controls directly to applications. Edgewise allows organizations to analyze the network attack surface and segment workloads based on the software and how it's communicating. Edgewise monitors applications and protects data paths using zero-trust segmentation. Visit edgewise.net/Security Weekly to get your free month of visibility. Some restrictions apply. Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/Security Weekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. Endgame's converged endpoint security platform is transforming security programs, their people, processes, and technology with the most powerful endpoint protection and simplest user experience, ensuring analysts of any skill level can stop targeted attacks before information theft. Endgame unifies prevention, detection, and threat hunt to stop known and unknown attacker behaviors at scale with a single agent. For more information, visit endgame.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. A quick announcement. Some of you have told us that you are overwhelmed by the amount of content that we distribute. In an attempt to make it a little easier for you to find what you're interested in, we've created a listener interest list, because I can't say interest apparently. Sign up for the list and select your interest by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe and click the interests button, or some button, and just go to securityweekly.com/subscribe. And you can go to securityweekly.com/booking to do all kinds of stuff. You can request a briefing, you can request a Black Hat or Hacker Halted interview, you can suggest a guest on the show, and do all kinds of stuff at securityweekly.com/booking. And now Josh Abraham, aka Jabra, is back on this show, and he was on a show yesterday because we can't get enough Jabra for the week, apparently. Josh, welcome to Paul's Security Weekly.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, nice to have you, my friend. And I'm excited to talk about, well, a couple things. The MITRE ATT&CK framework. Josh and his company Praetorian have also released an open sourced Metasploit inside of a Docker image to do all kinds of purple teaming stuff. And there are new updates to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and we're going to talk about that in the context of an attacker, as yesterday we talked about in the context of a defender on Enterprise Security Weekly. So, yeah.
Yes. So there's a whole lot to discuss, and yeah, there's plenty to talk about. So maybe we should just dive in.
Let's do it.
Excellent. So the first thing that we basically been working on was, as you'd said, a Metasploit version to basically focus on Purple Team and MITRE ATT&CK automation to make this a little bit easier. And so what was released today was our 1.0 release, and we actually put together a video demonstration of this. And so that's one thing that we can cover. And then additionally, I actually released a tool in a blog post today specifically around process injection to basically make that a little bit easier for testing.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's wicked cool. Well. Are you going to talk? All right. I'm excited about everything, so carry on.
Is that what that smell is?
Yes.
What was the question?
I like the process injection. Maybe we can start there because I think that's really cool.
Oh, he loves
process
anything with
injection is absolutely one of my favorite parts. And so before I dive into a demo, I'll set the stage initially. And so when you're doing a Purple Team style injection of testing injection, what you really need to be looking at is using a benign payload. So a payload that is not necessarily malicious or not necessarily like a traditional, like Meterpreter or like a Cobalt Strike or any sort of actual CT payload. And so what we're trying to do is use a benign payload.
Why is that? Because actual payloads are more fun than fake payloads, Josh.
100%. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to test the behavior of the endpoint EDR products.
Not the signature. If I used real payloads, it may trip a signature, but that's not really why it found me. I want it to find me with a benign payload and detect the method.
100%. And so if they're detecting the payload, that's great, but we need to make sure that they're detecting the behavior as well.
It's awesome.
And so detecting the payload isn't enough. And so when we do a purple team style test, we want to use a benign payload that validates and proves, did they actually detect the behavior, or was it an interpreter, which is not necessarily what's going to be used by a real adversary. So like China or Russia, if they're breaking into an organization, they're probably not going to be using the traditional pen tester or red team style tools. Or maybe they are, but
I was going to say, yeah, in some cases, maybe they are. Maybe with slight modification. And then, you're right. There are groups that are probably rolling all their own stuff to evade detection because it's that important to them.
Exactly. The NSA is going to be rolling their own stuff. We saw with the releases and such.
Well,
a lot of these groups are rolling their own.
And Josh, to that point, if you're trying to be stealthy, it's likely because you have a specific target in mind, and therefore you have to be stealthy. In the attackers that are like monetizing, not looking to spy or do damage or have some specific purpose, the monetization of the attackers, they just need to get into a whole bunch of organizations. So if it fails in 25%, and even if they get caught in 25%, as long as they roll their C2 channels, they're good, right?
Yeah, it depends on some of the motivations and desired outcomes. So if you're doing like a disinformation campaign, or you're trying to look like your stuff looks like this particular payload, then that all can happen. But regardless of all of that, the behaviors at the end of the day, that's what the detection tools need to actually capture and also flag. And so one of the tools I put together was a tool for testing injection to make it super easy. And so looked at the landscape for what was available. And there was a number of tools that actually did some coverage for detection, testing injection based methods, but we weren't happy with what they did in terms of the comprehensiveness of their coverage. And also one of the elements that we like to use is shellcode for doing our injections, because then we can change the shellcode and do whatever we like at that from that perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen, and we can jump into some live demos.
That's awesome.
Excellent. So can you see my screen all right? How's the text on this?
Do we need to make the text a little bigger maybe? I would say crank it up one notch.
Go ahead and do that.
The nice part is if we go off my eyes, it'll be big enough for most.
So many jokes, so little time.
Right? And I even have glasses on that have like a 1x magnification. Yeah, it's beautiful.
How was that for you?
I was just like running back to the microphone to let but anyway.
How was that for
beautiful?
Beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Excellent. So the tool I created is called Vulcan, and it basically handles all of your injection style testing needs. So compiled this with Visual Studio, and we have a README on the GitHub page, and obviously we'll be including notes in the show notes. But just running it straight up on the command line, I actually included the usage step, so that if you've never run the tool, if you need to get started, you have examples to just copy and paste, because copy and pasting is absolutely the best way to do what you're doing. So that's just a whole lot of fun.
Well, yeah, and I love that we've been nerding out on keyboards lately and finding the perfect keyboard. In everything that we do, we try to type less, even though we have the world's most fantastic hand assembled, even in some cases, keyboards, right?
Yes. Speaking of which, later.
Anyway.
Later.
Totally want a neural interface. I can't wait till we get it.
Yeah, so there's no voice activated interface for this at this time, but we'll work on that as a potential future request in the future. So starting out, we're going to just spawn Notepad, because I love injecting into Notepad, because why not? And then just a quick example, everybody's favorite, create remote thread, right? So just a simple example. And we've actually included sample shellcode inside of the utility for doing things like spawning the calculator, spawning the message box. Pretty simple examples, and you can obviously go into the source code, modify that shellcode to have whatever you want. Or
and Josh, what I love is that you're running regular executables, but via some type of process injection. And
correct.
So it's totally all about the method in which you can invoke code, and not about the code that you can execute. It's brilliant.
100%. And so we can do like a message box, which is one of the most benign, or you can do the calculator, which is everybody's favorite POC for getting execution.
Right.
So depending on what you want to do, again, these are controllable at runtime. So if you want to take base64 based shellcode, put it in a file, you want to run it, go ahead. Like, not a problem. This totally supports that.
Gotcha. So you can put any type of payload you want in there.
Yeah, and so a calculator, spawning the calculator, that's cool. Message box, that's pretty benign. That works. Or if you have some exotic payload that you want to try, throw it in there and make that work as well. We're just going to go off and use the calculator because it's the most simple example, and so that just spawns our calculator, and there we go. And we saw that Notepad actually gets killed because that's the way that shellcode is actually designed. It's gonna stop that process, and so it handles that. And so that's an intentional component of that shellcode that I passed in. But if I go down the list and I can just copy and paste these examples, you'll see the DLL injection, all of these different methods, and then our shellcode methods that are also supported, and then some of these others which are I guess a little bit less common in terms of some of the tools. And so we wanted to try to make it easier for people that are doing a purple team style detection assessment of these different EDR products and looking at injection, because it's such a big TTP. If you look at it and you think about it, there's so many different ways that you could do it. What are these tools, these EDR products? What do they actually do? What do they detect and what do they not detect? And at the end of the day, the value to the offense from doing a purple team style test is that's going to inform your red team to be able to make decisions faster.
Now, Josh, are any of these methods that you list there, are they used by completely legitimate software? And is it just a very low frequency at which they're used, or are they pretty much like never used in legitimate software?
So that's going to depend on the function. So some of these very common, some of these less so common. That's going to depend, and that's specific to the different techniques. I will say that all the techniques that we included are already public.
Gotcha.
There's nothing that is like considered like a new 0-day vulnerability in any of this. We're just trying to make it that much easier for anybody who wants to do injection tests. Make it fast, make it easy, make it quick, and get you the data that you're looking for faster.
And Josh, this is only supported on Windows today. Do you have plans to do Linux or Mac OS?
So at this time, this is a strictly Windows only based tool. You could do a version for Linux or Mac, but the way that this was built was not with that in mind.
Gotcha.
So these are very Windows specific in terms of the techniques and the process.
And this is open source?
That's correct. Yeah. So if you go to if you go to our blog, which is Praetorian.com, and if you click on the blog, you'll see a blog post that I did where I basically did a write-up of this utility, why it's useful, how it works, and a quick example of how to get started and start using it.
That's awesome. And for those that want to contribute, you could start modeling a Linux in a Mac OS, start coding that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you wanted to look at the blog post, I have it up here. I don't know if you guys can see my screen. Let me switch the screen share. Switch my screen share. So this is just on our blog, and we have the code, which is on the Praetorian GitHub page. It's Praetorian -code, and then Vulkan is the name of the utility.
Is that because it's very
compiling it in Visual Studio?
Is that because it's very logical? Is that the name Vulkan?
I was just live long and prosper.
Naming stuff is hard, and so that was the name that I thought of at the time.
Appreciate your honesty. I like it. I was expecting some big long story there, but
no, naming stuff is actually really hard.
I agree.
When you go in and you build a utility, I've always felt like I'll name the stuff, last. I build the tool and whatnot,
Yes.
and then coming back to the name. This one just sort of, it was on the tip of my tongue, and I just sort of like, yeah, we'll just go with that. Star Wars,
Very
maybe. Well, there's some references there, but yeah, no, it includes all the utilities, and so the build process is fairly straightforward. Fire up Visual Studio, and then just do the compile, and then you're off to the races with running it. I will say that right now we're recommending that you use a 32-bit process for doing your injection if you're using 32-bit DLLs or shellcode. So the cross architecture isn't something that I fully tested,
Mhm.
but I did test this on Windows 10, x86, and x64. So go to town on it, and I'm sure you'll see good results. Shouldn't be any issues. And then if you wanted to change out the shellcode, there are steps on how you would do that. So this is just a basic example that I used from MSF Venom with Metasploit. And so including the benign calculator execution or the message box shellcode, fairly easy to do. And then you can just base64 encode it. And then there you go. You're off to the races.
Sweet.
So that is the majority of the Vulkan side. Are there any other techniques or pieces of this that you guys want to see that would be interesting for you guys?
Larry, Joff, Lee, questions for Josh on this great utility?
What did he say for the last 10 minutes?
What have
Sorry.
you been?
No.
Keep your head in the game, Joff.
That's terrible.
Joff is
I'm
pretty
sorry.
old. He probably dozed off for a little while.
Yeah. What did he say? Huh?
Yeah.
Hold on.
It's past my nap time.
I will throw this over to Larry.
No, I specifically don't have any questions, but I can absolutely see the value in.
I don't think you do a lot of. You're mostly red teaming rather than purple teaming today.
We do some purple teaming, not nearly as much as some of the red teaming stuff, but having that utility,
Yeah,
as it were,
exactly.
to be able to emulate all the stuff that we do that folks should be able to monitor and catch.
You know what I call purple teaming?
Yeah.
I call purple teaming red teaming, changing to purple about midway through.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Joff's right. That's oftentimes how it happens.
That's exactly how we see.
Red team. Oh, shit, we're owned. How'd you do that?
Yeah, like we're owned
Yeah.
the first day about 3, 4, 6 different ways. Maybe we should just go to a purple team and that would be more effective, right? It's kind of how I envision it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a negotiation, but that tends to happen a lot. Now, starting out purple in the beginning, yeah, we do that. We just call it something different.
Yeah.
But,
Now, Josh, it sounds like you're doing a lot more of what Joff was talking about, starting off on the purple teaming side.
So the way that we sort of do it is, we'll work with clients on a recurring basis to do purple team style tests, and we'll basically do recurring purple teams.
Yep.
And the idea usually is to get them ready for a red team style test. If they're not
Sure.
ready for it, they likely already know that, and therefore, if you go in with a red team test and you do all the things and you achieve all of the objectives, but they didn't have much in terms of detection, then the question is, what was the value really? If they know that beforehand, then it's much more valuable to say, let's start with make sure that your detection controls are up to speed, sufficient, and then get you to a place where we feel like you're ready for a red team. Because not setting the customer up for success is just a disservice, right?
It segues into what we were talking about yesterday on Enterprise Security Weekly, in the context of what I said to others on the show, right? What I said was that there are some fairly still today significant gaps in what we see as, I'll call them exposures to, not be specific to vulnerability or exploit or whatever, right? But exposures that we've identified as senior security people, security researchers, pen testers. There's gaps between what we see as the ways that attackers are being successful and what defenders are aware of in terms of the ways in which the methods and techniques or TTPs that attackers are using today. And I think the MITRE ATT&CK framework is critical to bridging that gap between us collectively, like hosts on the show, going, no one's really like fixing these fundamental Active Directory issues as an example, and all these other products and all these other standards, guidelines, policies, whatever, like just are missing this entire class of basically I go from plugging into the network to domain admin in less than an hour. Why aren't we fixing those things? And to me, the MITRE ATT&CK framework and the surrounding tools behind it are helping close that gap.
Mm-hmm.
So
Josh, that brings us
more like this is basically the leverage for organizations and defenders to be able to call BS on a vendor who claims that they can do something, and you can prove or disprove that that's actually true. You can actually validate assumptions that you've previously made. You can say, well, looking at what's possible inside of an environment, we know that shellcode injection does not work, or we know DLL injection does not work. We've tested these techniques, these different behaviors using benign payloads, and that is, this is the source of truth for both the blue team and the red team.
Right.
And so when we look at it like internally on the red team side, the data that you get from doing a purple team is basically the state of the organization or the customer at that point in time. And it's, sometimes, you have, different products and they can be configured differently. And so some of those are customer or configuration dependent. But oftentimes if you say, let's take create remote thread, for example, how many of the EDR products in the space would actually detect that as a behavior if run across all of them? This basically, fits into, you could build a matrix for all these different products and you could have all of that information, and that's super valuable if you're a red team. And so it's
and what's interesting, Josh, this could segue into a standardized way to test endpoint, I'll call it endpoint security products, right? Or security products in general against these techniques.
Yep, absolutely. And so Minor Attack is actually already doing that.
They published some of that. Yep.
They're doing the evaluations for the different endpoint products. They're a nonprofit, and so there's no issue with that. And so it's definitely a valuable utility. And so hopefully, I sent this information over to them. Hopefully it'll make it a little bit easier for them to test different behaviors in a more comprehensive way.
That's fantastic.
Across the different methods of injection, because I think that for the endpoint is one of the most important. And so hopefully this utility fits into a lot of people's test harness. And so being able to get that data back, what's useful, what's not useful, what techniques have been, get detected by everything. And then, on the red team side, we can remove those, from the playbook.
And I guess, Josh, the next level of that is gaining support from Microsoft to make it more difficult to do some of these things, which, I mean, there's a lot of different techniques that we're talking about, right? But having Microsoft adopt support for basically taking out a lot of these techniques makes the attacker's job harder, makes the defender's job easier if inherently these things by design and maybe future designs or enhancements to the operating system just don't work anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So Microsoft has a difficult road with that in terms of the legacy side. They, in my opinion, they've been doing excellent work on the security side. Windows Defender, Windows ATP, and the AMSI, the anti-malware scripting interface, or scan interface. Sorry. It's really great stuff across the board, and it's making the attackers work that much harder. The issue is that they have legacy stuff that goes back so many years that it's supposed to work this way.
Yes.
What you were saying, where we're not actually exploiting vulnerabilities, we're using the system as it was designed
to execute code.
Itself.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. We're using the system against itself, and so it's supposed to work this way. And so they have to play the sort of the game of being able to detect behaviors that are being executed. And I see it. It's obvious that they're definitely trying, and they're definitely doing good work in terms of pushing attackers to move from the traditional techniques towards more sophisticated. But it's a long way to go before all of these techniques just don't work out of the box on the operating system level.
So, Josh, I got a question, and it's about the tool and the methods, and it's maybe an obscure question, but what happened to method 900 and 1100 and so forth and so on?
Yeah, so some of the methods that I was originally writing and trying to get into the tool, they were not working fully when I did the release. And so I wasn't happy with them, and I removed them from the listing there.
Right, and no need to renumber. And that was what I figured, but that's one of those things that I see something that's unusual. And clearly 701 was one that you fit in somewhere that made sense to put there.
Yeah, at the time that was a decision that was made, but
decisions were made.
Yeah, why not 750? Never mind. For audio listeners, we're looking at Josh's screen output, and he's numbered all of the methods, and they jump around a little bit after the 600s, 700s. So,
You know, I love the randomness or lack of randomness, or who cares? You just call the number what you call the number. Doesn't matter.
he created his own index.
It was sort
okay?
of like the Hashcat approach to the methods.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the method number doesn't really matter too much. It's just what is the technique that you're actually doing, and I could renumber them as just as easily. But
No, that's work.
For an initial release. It was just
I could see it. You know, I could see the line of thinking if you were going for a category and you were like, well, I'll skip 100 so I can fill in others in the category. You know, that sort of makes sense. But that maybe was not what you're going for. Who knows?
doesn't matter. Regardless,
It doesn't. It's
works.
completely irrelevant.
But that said, that just means that Josh is sitting on code that he's going to make work and make this tool even better.
Well, the code is out there, and
or
you guys can
your
all
pull request.
contribute.
Or your
so
pull request.
Do that.
Yeah.
Make it work. So.
Yes.
Anyways, so that's a little bit about the Vulkan injection tool. We have another code release that we also dropped. So maybe we shift gears and talk about that one.
Let's do it.
Excellent.
Do it.
So we chatted a little bit about Metasploit, and what we did was we recently put together our 1.0 release of our basically our MITRE ATT&CK automation using Metasploit framework. And so with this, we basically added 3 new modules to our code base, and also put together a quick video demonstration for how to get it set up and running. And so for those who are familiar with Docker and using Metasploit in a Docker instance, we can go through that video. Let me just pull up. Here we go.
Yeah, I think Mark and Johnny have the video queued up.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and play that, that'd be great.
Hey everyone, we're going to give a quick demo of getting the Praetorian's Purple Team Attack automation all set up and using that to run a couple of TTPs. So let's get started. We've got the documentation up here, a Kali VM with a secure password, and a Windows machine on the same VLAN. So let's get started. Because we're using Kali, we're going to use these instructions for getting Docker set up. So start copy pasting.
So we're using Kali because we figured that just doing the install would make it so much easier rather than having to just do the Metasploit side. If you didn't have that set up, it just makes it a little bit easier and quicker to basically get going.
Basically, you can build Kali using Docker images and build scripts today too.
Yep, 100%. So just to get the Metasploit side of that set up, it's super easy and quick to do. The video does walk you through all of that process for how to do this. Just make it a little bit easier.
And as we said,
Cool.
And as we said, Josh, Docker's the right way to wrap a custom Metasploit instance.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty good option because you don't have to worry about dependencies. So if you're running this inside of Kali or you're running this inside of anywhere you can run a Docker instance, you can run Metasploit, and that's super handy and useful.
Absolutely.
You don't have to fight the dependency war. Getting this stuff set up is a little bit of a difference from maybe your normal process if you haven't done it before, but just running any Docker container is relatively straightforward. So you do it once and you are off to the races.
And there's a lot of advantages to Docker versus VMs or virtual, like Python virtual environments. Especially when you get to deployment specifically.
Python virtual environments kill me.
Yeah.
Yes. You're killing me, Smalls.
Just roll it into a Docker image, dude.
Yeah.
It's so much better. And there's so many great resources on how to do that more efficiently. I was reading some cool articles about how to take your Python Docker images from a couple of 100 meg all the way down to 1 or 200 meg to make them a little easier to work with and stuff. So, and cheaper to host in the cloud in terms of bandwidth and storage and all that stuff. But it requires a lot of research and education to get to that point, and some retraining of your brain.
Yeah.
Basically is what I presented at RSA, right? Is you got to retrain your brain as to how you think of environments and software, and the new, the fancy term for that is workloads, right? Is how you think of things today. But still, it does require
some retraining. For sure.
Yeah, some retraining and research and reconfiguration of your stuff.
Yep. So right now we're doing the Git clone, and that's github.com/Praetorian-code, and then the purple team attack. So if you just go to the Praetorian GitHub page, you'll see it listed there. And so at this point, we're just doing the Git clone, and then on the right-hand side of the video, he's actually generating the payloads. And in this case, he's just using a standard interpreter payload, and that's for the initial shell. Because the thought process when you're doing the purple team is, when we were building out the Metasploit automation, we're building these out as post modules. And why are we doing that? Well, Meterpreter is an amazingly great rat, and so you can use the power of Metasploit and specifically Meterpreter to basically drive the systems to execute your specific TTPs on the endpoint. And so that's sort of how we sort of structured it. We're supporting both Windows, Mac, and Linux. And so on the Windows side, you'd use a Meterpreter payload. On the Mac or Linux side, you'd use a normal shell for that. There, but because the power of Meterpreter is super useful when you're talking about Windows automation for post exploitation. And so what he's doing now on the left hand side of the screen for the Docker instance is setting up the handler and a configuration file for the listeners at this point.
Start the Docker service, and then build the container. And this can take a little while. If you're running on a VM, make sure you have enough RAM allocated to the VM. You'll get some weird errors during the build process if there's not enough RAM, and so spend a little while figuring all that stuff out.
So all this is taking a while.
Yeah, the first time you build a Docker image,
Okay,
it
we're
builds
assuming the end
everything
of the
from
container
scratch.
build because it took about 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, the first time you build the Docker image.
So now we should be able to start the container.
So while this process is sort of going, which is a little bit of setup and just getting the normal Meterpreter MSF console, we can also talk about the fact that there's the new MITRE ATT&CK release. So they basically, on Tuesday of this week, was the April release. And the new major component to it was the addition of the impact tactic, which included a ton of different new TTPs. And that's something that we have not had yet in the past. And so I'll go through and I'll explain what that actually means. So they were looking at the availability or integrity of systems after an attacker had gotten into the environment and done something that had an impact to the business that was sort of left behind, or stopping a service or defacing a website, that sort of thing.
Excellent. So learning from actual issues that have happened.
Yeah, 100%. So if you go to the attack.mitre.org/resources/updates, which will be in the show notes, they have their April release, and you can see that on my screen at this point, which is a number of these different TTPs. There were 14 techniques underneath the impact tactic, which is new, and then there were a number of new techniques, some of which we contributed, such as compile after delivery, which is just using the Windows compiler, which is default and included on all modern versions of Windows, as well as some updates to existing techniques, such as things like valid accounts and PowerShell, which we were contributing back. Just pushing these updates, super important.
Excellent.
Okay, so shifting back to the video, so we have our he's just setting up the 64-bit version of the handler. But what we're going to do is once you have a session, and this should be familiar for everybody who's done any sort of pen testing with Metasploit, you have your sessions. And so what we've added, which is new, is the ability to, we're calling all of our modules, they're basically purple modules. So if you're going to run a TTP, it's going to be a specific module. And so the names are included in basically correspond to the mapping inside of MITRE ATT&CK. And so if you have a MITRE ATT&CK TTP number that you're looking at demonstrating, you can just load the back end and just search for the specific number that you're interested in, and then it would come up inside of the interface. And so if you're in MSF console, you can just type search purple, and it will print out all the TTPs that we support. And then from there, you can search for the specific TTP that you're interested in demonstrating, select your session, and then you can just go to town and start executing it. Now, one of the things that you'll need to keep in mind as you're executing a specific TTP is many of these TTPs can be executed a number of different ways. So you might have 3 or 4 different ways for a specific TTP, and to get full coverage, you would need to test each one of those. And each of those could be demonstrated differently, and perhaps products might detect it or block it. And those would be different things to consider in terms of rating and delivery of those results. So just a few little nuggets there in terms of when you actually are in the field and using this stuff. Detection and prevention obviously are completely different. So this, we'll see the listing of the different TTPs. He's going to be doing the system time discovery. And so just executing that on the client, select your session, set your session to whatever your session is, execute it, and then you see the output there, which includes the timestamp and the output was successfully executed. Now, the next example that he's going to use here is something that actually does something that's more interesting than just printing information from the endpoint. So we're going to spawn the calculator, and we're going to do it using the install util TTP. So he's going to set this up, and by default, we're going to actually do the cleanup, and so we have to run it a second time to basically make sure that we're not doing the cleanup for us. In the video, we need to make sure that we set the architecture correctly, so he's gonna do that as well. The architecture needs to match what you're actually testing.
Josh, how long is this video?
This is another couple minutes.
Okay.
So if you just pause right there, you'll basically see that he's executing the calculator via the install util method. And from there, if you switch over to the, when he switches over, you'll see that it's going to be running, but the automation actually killed it for you. And so he needs to rerun the module.
And this video is on your YouTube channel as well?
That's correct. Yeah. So if you go to the, if you go to the code base on GitHub, which I've sent over and should be included in the show notes, you'll be able to take a look at that and be able to reproduce everything that was done. That's the simple example. You see the calculators running right there. You'll see the code and the way that we got that running. So that was basically the demonstration of the Metasploit automation for you.
It's awesome.
So it just sort of fits really nicely in terms of anyone who's familiar with pen testing at all should be able to just sort of pick up this tool and start running it, start using it, start adding value, and start doing some really great Purple Team work.
Is this a tool that largely is in use by red teams, external red teams and internal blue teams, Josh? Or do you foresee this, some of them being used by the blue teams directly or internal red teams? Probably all of the above, I would imagine.
So it's, I mean, anyone who wants to do detection coverage assessment,
yeah,
this fits into that tool set. I think that a traditional red team is probably more focused on building out their own TTPs and their own capabilities, and doing so, depending on how you want to structure it. This is definitely valuable for internal organizations who have a security team or offensive security team that wants to do this type of work. I would say that from a Purple Team side, anyone who's a pen tester should be able to pick up this tool and start running with it. This is definitely going to make organizations better. A lot of the services teams that do Purple Team or detection style testing, it's going to fit right into whatever their process is for this type of work as well. And there are over 100 TTPs that we've included, so it's definitely should be a compelling case for all of them to start using it, given the fact that the coverage is pretty good and there are commercial tools in the space, but
sure,
this is the one that we would go with.
Larry, Joff, do you foresee yourselves using this on red team engagements, or is this something specifically where you're more closely working with the customer?
I think this is definitely more of the purple side.
Agreed.
But certainly,
I would agree with that.
But by looking at the tool from the purple side, you start to get ideas about
for the red side.
For the red side. So,
like in your lab, you're running this stuff to be like, this technique works this way. Like now I can take this and roll my own custom module and whatever custom code that I built.
Shit, I had forgotten about TTP 1291.
Yeah.
Shit, that's right. I got to update my tool chain and
That's funny.
If you know that there's no detection in the environment for a specific TTP, that's super valuable for any red team to know.
Yep.
Right? That's one. The other is if there are 3 or 4 different ways to execute a TTP and your red team's only looking at or thinking about one way, then, diversifying your tool set is super important, right? That's super valuable for a red team. If you have a purple team and your purple team is basically the source of truth for the environment for detection coverage.
Yes.
At the end of the day, that's valuable for the red team to know and have that as a data point that feeds into the red team so they can make better decisions and be able to emulate and simulate actors. That's going to make your red team better.
Yep. And on the converse, on the purple team, that purple team is that knowledge that's the truth for what their detection looks like. And if you can deploy, if you can take one of those and deploy in different methods, helping them be able to detect those moving forward is amazing, which is why we have this.
Yep.
Now,
absolutely. And so,
question, and this may involve some discussion between Joff and Josh. Silent Trinity was one of the more recent kind of frameworks we covered for gaining execution in a red team environment. Are some of those techniques built into this, or what would that take? Obviously, maybe some offline discussion might be necessary to do that.
Yeah. So one of the things that we did when we were looking at the MITRE ATT&CK TTPs that were already inside of MITRE ATT&CK that I believe is used in Silent Trinity is the ability to use system management automation inside of PowerShell, which is basically what that means is the ability to call .NET capabilities inside of PowerShell. And previously that was not inside of the PowerShell TTP. It was there, it just wasn't included in the write-up in the description. And so we contributed that back in the recent release. That's something that should be added and included and tested. And Silent Trinity is an example of how to do that in a particular way. So absolutely, I think that having the diversity to look at these TTPs, different tools are going to do them in different ways, and the integration of those into MITRE ATT&CK and also whatever your process is for detecting or validating that you're not able to detect certain activities is really important.
Yeah, and I would chime in, and I'd agree with that, actually. Anything that is able to exercise down to the .NET, dynamic runtime, the CLR, the DLR, I guess they call it, beyond and independent of language. I mean, PowerShell is just one example, is the way to go, right? Because there's going to be more and more of this diversity in attack mechanisms where people are just leveraging assemblies onto the system the best way they can get them there. There's going to be no shortage of techniques that exploit that kind of avenue.
Yeah, 100%. The other TTP that was included in the release, which we contributed, was the ability to basically do compilation on the endpoint. And so if you have if you have C# code and you have a utility like the C# compiler, which is included on all systems, that's one way to get there. So that MITRE ATT&CK does not include all TTPs that are possible. There's a delta there. And so ensuring that all, offensive-minded individuals in the community consider that and, contribute back. Because if there's a TTP or something specific, and they're not even, oftentimes they're not really even very exotic. And there's a simple example that comes to mind when you think about, network level reconnaissance. But, just thinking about what is not included and, how and what, should be included is definitely an important element when you think about red teaming, purple teaming, blue teaming. What are we not seeing in these frameworks that is possible? And making sure that you're always pushing the envelope to that next level.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked about this yesterday, right? Like you can be safe, or you can be safe from MITRE ATT&CK, and you're still not completely 100% safe ever, right? But when you're safe from MITRE ATT&CK, you're only safe from what's defined in MITRE ATT&CK. And when Josh is saying, like, there's other stuff out there that obviously is not covered, right? And what we don't want is people to get a false sense of security, to say, I've tested my environment extensively against MITRE ATT&CK, therefore, like, I'm good, I'm really confident now. Like, no, like, don't gain that confidence, right? Like, yes, you've upped the bar significantly for an attacker. I think if you're testing effectively and implementing the remediation against everything, or as much as you can in the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you're doing a great job, right? But don't have that confidence that means no one can break into our environment.
I'm going to play the role of Jeff here. So if you implement PCI DSS, whichever the latest standard is, you've significantly, you've raised the bar.
Right.
For what it is, but you're not invulnerable to everything.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I always draw it back to the analogy of an IDS filter that I saw years ago. And the IDS filter was for SQL injection. And the filter said, or 1 equals 1. If I see that string come across the network, then it is clearly bad. Well, what about or 2 equals 2?
Right? Or A equals A.
And so I think the analogy is there. You know, you've got to think of defenses in a systematic way that go beyond just the attack of the day. It's to use the cliche defense and death, but it's more of the systematic architecture that is defensible in general, rather than just band-aids that you're patching on to deal with attack du jour. That's really the way to think about things. And you know, you look at something like the MITRE ATT&CK framework. You know, I think the categorization is really well done, right? I mean, they're thinking ahead of the curve, but we are dealing with a moving target, right? Things are never going to stop, right? We're always going to continue to develop new techniques, good guys, bad guys, and the blue team's always going to be trying to get ahead of that as well. And so we're always going to have this continuing cycle going on. And I mean, that's sort of healthy in some ways, but it's a reminder not to be static.
Well, and you know what's interesting, Jeff, along those lines, and I started to touch on this yesterday, but you know, I used to think that in almost all cases, if you were to do some of the basic hygiene, patching, configuration management, detection of, you know, not just as a patch is missing, but how are these techniques that attackers are using executed on my network and on my systems, and be able to detect those, that you made the attacker's job harder in that the exploit techniques they would use would stand out more, that they would have to be more noisy, that they would have to do things that were more abnormal. And that may be the case. However, what you could also say today is that when you push attackers to those more advanced techniques, in some cases, that means they could be more stealthy if they're careful. And you may not detect, you know, those extraneous cases. But now you've also, on the flip side of that, the positive is you've wiped out a whole class of attackers at a certain skill level or with a certain
That's what I was about to say.
Bingo.
Right, John? Yeah.
Bingo.
Right?
Right. I mean, the door swings both ways, right?
Yep,
Just like
exactly.
you said. But you've done, and I've worked with a lot of customers on this, like if you get that bar up high enough and you have eliminated a whole class of attackers that are using common off-the-shelf script kiddie stuff, you are in a better place.
Sure.
There's no doubt.
Yeah,
right?
agreed.
You're in a better place. You're making pen testers work harder. You're making attackers work harder. And if they really want to get it, then, you know, they're going for much more targeted, much more crafted stuff. And then it's down to how high the fidelity of your controls are.
Yes.
Are you at a place where you're doing things like honey token and honeypot-like technologies, where you are not just depending on the noisy false positive technologies, which we've historically seen are great for, you know, keeping the crappy shit at bay, but they're not really good for advanced attackers, right? You want that stuff to work, but you really want high fidelity on the advanced attacks so that those things really stand out when they occur.
The other thing that comes to mind is when you look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you're going to have, here are the number of TTPs that are being released on a regular basis by MITRE. You have on the blue side, how many new TTPs are we detecting since the last MITRE ATT&CK release? And then you have the APT, the most advanced adversaries, NSA, China, Russia, et cetera, that are, they're just developing new TTPs that are just, world-class, and they're like the best offense in the world. So you have those three different levels. And if your blue side is not exceeding the number of TTPs that are coming out of MITRE ATT&CK, then it seems like you're going to be at a lagging indicator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
a good way
with
to put
that
it.
as a metric, if you need to detect and basically, if you expect to be fighting, nation state level actors, you need to be able to build your program such as your detection and response capabilities exceed the number of TTPs that are being released on a regular basis by MITRE ATT&CK.
Yeah. Right. And as Joff said, you might be detecting the result of an advanced attack via a honey token or some other mechanism. Right. I mean, and again, Joff, I agree, it's kind of cliche, like defense in depth, which I think takes on multiple different meanings. But in this context, it's really about what are my other defensive measures, monitoring measures that I'm going to discover that something happened. It may be later in the stages of the attack, right? Sure, but hopefully there was some story that someone was in a major organization for like 6 months or something. I forget which one it was, but hopefully it's less than 6 months, for example.
I'd argue that would be sort of along the lines of a compensating control, where I know I can't detect this, but I can detect it once they've gotten here.
Yes, and here's what's really important, and
And I think a lot of these controls are trending towards data analytical approaches because of this, right? I mean, because people, people who defend their networks do have a gut feeling of when things are behaving from a macro sense in the correct way. If they've got enough instrumentation on their network and they are starting to see some things in terms of alert volume, in terms of specific events, in terms of traffic trends, they're going to start investigating further. And, that's important, right? Getting those controls in place really matter. You may not have super high fidelity on a specific attack, but you do have a data analytical sense that things are not right. And so you can go chase it down further and stop
with that. One of the things that when you take a TTP, whatever the TTP is, there are specific data sources that are required to be able to properly detect it. If you don't have the data sources, then from a data analytics perspective, you have nothing. So once you start getting that data, and then you can start tuning and tweaking it, and then working with the different operations teams to basically make sure that it's the right amount of noise. The signal noise ratio is correct.
I mean, a perfect example is, and again in this framework, right? I mean, if you see, again, for us, this is kind of run of the mill, but this could easily happen in an environment. If you see 5 workstations suddenly create a new service, and you have high fidelity on that service creation event, then you've got a serious problem, right? We know it because we know that's a direct indicator of lateral movement in a network, because it's an indicator of potentially a usage of PSExec or a similar type of technology where you're logging in, creating a service. So, it's those kinds of things that we need to get people to put higher fidelity on, and also to look at things like honey tokens and stuff. I mean, password spray is a classic example. I mean, I'm doing one tonight in an environment, right? If you had 20, 30 accounts that were honey tokens that were never supposed to be used in regular usage, and a password spray comes along, well, guess what? It's not good, right? Yes. If you get login events for those accounts. Right?
Hell, I'd argue if you get hundreds of attempted login attempts, failed login attempts, or thousands of failed login attempts, you should be able to detect that.
Well, you should, but in very, very large environments, I give people their due. There's a lot of pushback saying, look, we've got 100,000 people or we've got 200,000 people. Our volume of login attempts is already in the thousands.
Well, failed login attempts, I would argue that...
Failed, I would agree with you.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, because of course, if you have... You're likely going to have failed login attempts, thousands of them in fairly short periods of time, but that you should be able to detect.
So there's all kinds of things. I mean, it's what you're hearing bouncing back and forth. Is there are all kinds of things that people can do that should at least raise people's suspicion to go investigate further.
Sure.
I had a question.
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead, Lee. Sorry.
So it's okay. So the what's been going through my head is we've been talking about all the scenarios which are largely applicable to our traditional IT, and I'm wondering what happens to the conversation and the exercise when you talk about verifying capabilities with our cloud-based IaaS instead of on-prem. Are people even thinking about it? And can we?
Yes.
Do we have stuff to help?
Yeah, so absolutely. So that's actually one of the areas that MITRE ATT&CK doesn't do so well on in terms of like cloud coverage, but that's absolutely one of the areas that we're pushing forward on and contributing back a number of different cloud-based TTPs. In terms of the coverage, what we've seen in the past, cloud is no real different than at its core. Having an environment in the cloud isn't really different from just a normal traditional corporate environment. It's just extended into another data center that is managed by another organization. With that, though, you have some unique components that are very specific to the cloud side, and then with that, you have the detection side, which is, just fundamentally different.
It's interesting, and it even extrapolates further and gets kind of bucks from the traditional trend even more when we talk about serverless. And when you were talking about failed login attempts and trending that and looking at the data, when you go to a serverless environment where you're just basically executing functions, I did a briefing today with Aqua Security, and one of their problems they're trying to tackle is how do we do the same level of security in a serverless environment where you just really have code that's running. And one of the things we're looking at is baselining how often all of your functions are called. And if one is called 1,000 times, where normally it's just 20 times in a day, is a bad example, but you know what I'm getting at, right? And graphing that, similar to what Signal Sciences does on the application side as well, and looking for those variances. Now we can start taking some of the monitoring that we're doing in logging and with user accounts, but apply that to applications as well. So I thought that was really, really exciting new features that are coming forth in that realm.
Yeah, so Lee, I think on the cloud side, it's an area that I know our team is definitely focused on, and I think that it's one that MITRE ATT&CK is going to be addressing. I don't know if I'd say soon, but they definitely will address it at some point. It's definitely something that we're pushing on, so for sure.
Well, one of the things that got me thinking about cloud is I was looking at the changes to the attack frame, and I started because we're focusing on the impact stuff, and I'm thinking, how many people think about that as applies to when they're moving something to the cloud? I mean, not to get too simplistic, but I'm thinking there's a lot of areas that people aren't thinking about, and just getting them thinking, although we could probably go a lot farther when it comes to cloud, getting them thinking in the first place is a huge win.
Yep. So a lot of customers have already been asking about it. And so that's the feedback that we've been giving to MITRE, and we're working on formalizing and pushing forward a number of TTPs related to cloud.
Yeah.
Josh, thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly.
Yes.
Tonight.
Always a
so
pleasure.
much.
Nice to have you, my friend. Great discussion.
Happy to be on the show, and let me know. And you guys can find me on Twitter at Jabra, and I'll be looking forward to coming down sometime soon.
Absolutely. Check out the show notes, wiki.securityweekly.com, all things on Praetorian's blog for all of the links to all the resources that we talked about tonight. With that, we'll take a short break, come back with the security news for this week.
In 2018, ransomware advanced significantly and is now capable of taking out infrastructure and operations across the globe. As a result, many organizations are bogged down in reactive work and often overlook the value of crucial information. In Domain Tools' Threat Intelligence Report, learn how to uncover some of the most critical insights from your organization's alerts and indicators that will allow you to shift to a more proactive posture. To download this white paper, please visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Recorded Future. They help security teams make more confident decisions faster. Recorded Future's technology automates broad collection and analysis of cyber threat data and delivers the rich external context you need to understand alerts and emerging threats. With real-time threat intelligence from Recorded Future, security teams respond to threats 63% faster and find undetected threats 10 times quicker. To get started, go to recordedfuture.com/securityweekly and sign up for the Recorded Future Cyber Daily. Every day, you'll receive an email with the top results for trending technical indicators, cyber news, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more. Subscribe today and stay ahead of cyber attacks.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Quick announcement, Security Weekly is returning to Las Vegas this summer for summer camp. That's right, Black Hat and DEF CON will be at both. Now, here's the thing, with the feedback that I've gotten from many in the industry, you've got a lot of choices as to who you can sit with and talk about your technology with that has an audience they can get it out to. And they sit with lots of different folks, right? And it's not a knock on them at all. When you sit with Security Weekly, though, you're sitting with fellow nerds. And the feedback I've gotten is they appreciate the opportunity to sit with fellow nerds. I'm not saying don't go sit with other people, right?
Right.
But when you come sit with us, sit with nerds, we nerd out, we put the video on the internet. If you'd like to request that activity or suggest to the company that you work for that, hey, we should sit with Security Weekly because they're fellow nerds and we'll get it out there to their audience and tell people about what we do, you can go to securityweekly.com/booking. Submit your request today. Also, there's one more announcement, I lied. KubeCon and Cloud Native Con in Europe 2019, Barcelona, May 20th through the 23rd. Join your peers at the Cloud Native Transformation Summit hosted by SysDig on May 20th. Our very own Matt Alderman will be emceeing the event. Pre-registration is required. You can add it to your KubeCon or plus Cloud Native Con registration. So do that because it's going to be a lot of fun.
Paul, if you don't mind, I have a real quick announcement that wasn't on that little thing there.
Sorry.
But nope. As of yesterday, there is a not to say brand new, but there is a new lead author and complete author, all 6 days, of the SANS 6617 wireless course.
Wow.
Holy shit.
I feel bad for that person having to maintain all that material.
That is a
Oh, wait, that's you.
a hell of an undertaking.
Wait, that's me.
Congratulations.
that's me.
No, it's awesome.
So
Congrats,
yeah,
dude.
I'm the new lead author as of yesterday. But that said, I am currently the lead author for all 6 days, with the intent for me to be adding James Lead Vidal, who's the other instructor, to be able to have some of that content for him. He's spooling up, and he's going to be starting to own some of that content as well, pretty damn quick here.
That's awesome.
Hey, Larry, congratulations, man! That is fantastic news.
Thank you. It's been a long time coming.
Awesome.
And expect more information. I've been working on slides already for this update for months, and
WPA 3
that was in the class.
Already did that update
6 months ago. Yep. WPA 3 was there. Bluetooth 5 has been in there. We're now adding Dragonfly. And
what is Dragonfly?
Dragonfly is the cracking for pins. It's not pins. For the encryption mechanism for authentication for WPA 3.
Okay.
It hasn't even really been fully rolled out yet, and Matthew Van Oof has already been broken it.
Yes, I think we covered that
Yes,
in the
we
show.
did.
Yeah.
We did.
Time
Well,
to
I
write some
think,
new exam questions.
Yes. Yes.
Oh.
I could not imagine a more deserving person, and I know Josh leaves it in very capable hands.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you.
congratulations, sir.
Yep. So James and I have been talking significantly about some restructure and some ads, and yeah, it's going to only continue to get more amazing. We are currently right now I'm writing additional slides for the software-defined radio module, so that's going to get bigger and better. And one of the ones that we've been talking about today and yesterday, like this is new, is to put in a giant section on LoRa.
Who?
LoRa? Long range radio. It's pseudo Zigbee, but at longer range.
I had a story in here for you.
Take it again.
I want to hear if you're building.
nowhere.
No, hold on. I have a story.
Yeah.
I don't know what the number was on it. It is my story number 16. Researchers at Harvard, John A. Paulson School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, have, for the first time, pop-up, go away, use a semiconductor laser to send and receive radio signals. The hybrid electronic photonic device uses a laser to extract and transmit microwave signals, providing a data rate that may one day lead to ultra high speed, even
Interesting.
Wi-Fi.
Interesting.
So the research that you're talking about, Paul. And Larry, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, which I'm likely to be wrong. Most of the wireless standards, as they've emerged to be faster and faster in the 802.11 bucket, have been leveraging MIMO technology, where we're trying to do parallel streams, essentially.
Yes.
This technology you're talking about, Paul, what am I trying to ask? It seems like it's a whole new approach. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, it looks like it to me.
I mean, a laser would imply it's using light and not sound waves. Is that, or that's not?
No.
Well, free space lasers have been in existence for some time.
Oh, yes. Yes, in fact, I installed one of those, and we used to make the joke that when it was foggy out and the laser would not work as well, that we'd have to go get a broom and a shovel and get all the packets out of the parking lot.
That's the thing. I'm sorry, not light. Radio.
Because we dropped a bunch of packets.
Radio versus light, but it's still
right.
a radio wave over similar to micro.
It's
what's the physics?
It's
behind
not radio. It's RF.
Yeah, okay.
It's radio frequency, but over a different spectrum, different portion of the spectrum.
I gotcha.
So visible light is radio frequency. It's just that we possess the hardware to be able to interpret that. However, 2.4 gigahertz, our bodies don't have the hardware to be able to interpret it.
Right.
So it's all the same mechanism, and it's the wavelength of the transmitted energy. It's just
I gotcha.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
It's just something we can't perceive. We can't.
So
perceive.
One's got to think, though, that there is a theoretical upper limit to the approach of continually using more and more parallel streams.
Right.
Right.
Eventually, you have spectrum limitations. You have reflectivity issues. There's no more. There's no more that you're going to be able to cram in there. I haven't. I'll be honest. I haven't done the reading on 802.11 AC and understood how that differs from N. Other than it is continual application of MIMO type technology.
Yes.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
multiple
So
levels.
this will help. The laser radio, which was previously researched in 2017 and 2018, works by means of an infrared laser frequency comb. A garden variety laser generates light at a single frequency, much like a violin plays a precise note, as opposed to a white noise generator spewing out the whole spectrum of sound. In a frequency comb, the laser produces multiple beams at multiple frequencies that are evenly spaced apart, like the teeth of a comb. So what Joff is saying, they're using MIMO technology,
it's effectively
but multiple streams in a much more dense, probably spectrum frequency, right?
Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
Dense might be the wrong.
And then the question becomes about where it's that type of focused type of technology. Does line of sight become an issue?
Yeah.
And
there are line of sight ones that exist today.
And will it penetrate dense objects such as walls, like
People
people and water and all those types.
people suck for disrupting wireless.
Literally,
They do.
they suck.
Literally, yes, literally. This is why you're the wireless expert, Larry.
But it can make for an interesting backhaul scenario. Think about it.
Yeah.
Using the laser as your backhaul, super high bandwidth, and then conventional Wi-Fi to get to the nodes. That could be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that's sort of the trickle-down effect, because when 5 gigahertz was first emerging, that's exactly what people were saying then as well.
Mm-hmm.
It would make a really good backhaul technology, and pretty quickly people realized that no, we can make this cell small enough to make 5 gigahertz very useful bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
So we see things literally trickle down. I mean, you could see the same effect going on again, where have mesh networks that are using infrared laser approach to keep the mesh up without so much cabling going on, which would be great.
You folks know, and our listeners know, I love to pick on surveys. It's one of my favorite pastimes. And in this one, I can pick on, but in a positive light, if that makes any sense, because I think there's some selection bias, although it's interesting to speculate as to what that means in terms of this selection bias. So the 2019 Open Source Security and Risk Analysis Report, essentially Synopsys is the vendor. They're a larger company and bought Black Duck software that does the open source auditing, right? But they surveyed examined the results of more than 1,200 audits of commercial applications and libraries performed by Black Duck Audit Services team. So that's where this data comes from, that says the risk issue in unpatched software, the risk issue is in unpatched software, not necessarily open source. They've got a lot of graphs that talk about how vulnerable open source is and all that stuff. So the bias could mean that the problem is even worse. The survey is based on organizations who perhaps believed the problem was so bad that they had to pay someone for an external audit. You could also theorize that some were forced to have an audit, either for compliance reasons, or someone just had evidence to believe that the problem was so bad that we have to go hire an external auditor to tell the internal folks how bad it is because no one believes the internal folks. So this is a
Story
case,
of my life, man.
This is a case where I think the survey, even with selection bias, has some merit, and the selection bias itself also has merit. In either case of how you think of it, I think what we can surmise is that this is a really heinous problem.
Yes.
So what you're really saying is the inception of the selection bias has a selection bias in and of itself due to another layer of inception.
I think it's a result. Is it a results biased? A selection bias based on results.
You can have results bias based on selection bias.
Right. Yes.
We had a really huge discussion about this at work today about a VPN thing that ultimately we determined that the infographic was crap based on the way the multiple selection biases
you come to. Yeah.
Before we move on, Paul,
Sure.
I want to make sure that there's 2 stories in the show notes that we address. The first one was one from last week that we didn't get to cover that was really important.
Was that the Assange one?
No, Jeff's story that's still in the show notes.
Yes.
How the Boeing 737 MAX disaster looks like to a software developer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
It is.
Lee, go ahead.
I was going to say that was a really interesting story about the 737 because it was a private pilot who and software developer who analyzed what they did in the 737 to make it not a new aircraft with a new certification path, which would cost about $10 million or something like that. And he started with the basics, that they put bigger engines on the plane, which had to be farther ahead of the wings. But when you accelerate, you get uncontrolled lift. So they created a software system that essentially stops the pilot from mucking with it. I liked his analogy. He said, eventually, we're going to get to 2 things in the cockpit. We're going to have a pilot and a dog. And the pilot's job is to fly the plane, and the dog's job is to bite the pilot to make sure he doesn't touch anything.
Yep.
So true.
I was really stunned in that whole story about how they engineered the plane such that accelerating with those powerful engines causes lift, and they have a software correction to compensate for that. I don't know. If my intuitive gut says that just seems wrong somehow.
Yeah, you know why? Because we're security people and we don't trust software in any shape, form, or fashion, especially when we step into the fuselage of an airplane that's going to eventually be at 30,000 feet.
Yep. And I relate this back to something that Joff, you and I have been working on recently. I cleared out some of the workshop, and now I've got some room to work on these arcade cabinets. And I've got this double dragon cabinet that there's something wrong with the board that it doesn't display all the colors. And I'm like, I can fix the board, and I've got to buy some stuff to troubleshoot it. And because it's really old tech, I've got to maybe flash some ROMs. Or I could just grab a Raspberry Pi with a shield.
Stick a Raspberry Pi in it.
A Raspberry Pi with a shield and emulate the whole goddamn thing. But by the time I buy the equipment to connect it to the cabinet so that the cabinet is original, the price is the same.
Yeah.
Like, I can emulate it or I can fix the problem.
Emulation gives you more flexibility.
Agreed. But for what this game is that the original is probably more valuable and would be more valuable to a collector, even in its broken state.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
So the answer is you're selling it to buy something else.
Well, I'm going to sell it to get it out of my damn workshop because it's been there for 3 years untouched.
Yeah.
And I have other projects I want to work on.
And KF is all, I mean, his arcade stuff is so he and I ask him questions about that, and he's just like, he's so into it. It's so cool.
I had an amazing conversation with him at DerbyCon because we do similar types of things.
Yeah.
And mine happens to be older technology than his is.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, like, we're going off track from the story, but while I was cleaning
on Paul's Security Weekly,
I was cleaning out some junk out of the workshop, and I found this arcade board, and I'm like, well, shit. This has got the same compatible stuff as the Double Dragon cabinet.
Or you could swap that in.
I can swap it in there, but now it's no longer a Double Dragon cabinet. It's Street Fighter 2. So Street Fighter 2 is way better than Double Dragon.
True. Yeah. So now you're buying a Street Fighter 2 cabinet.
Yeah, exactly. And I plug it in and the board works great. And I'm like, oh, the decisions, because the side art is all there for Double Dragon.
Yeah. The original side art,
You
right.
got to get a Double Dragon board.
Just buy a new board. There you go. Lee's got an idea. Just buy a new Double Dragon board.
The problem is that if I buy a known working board currently on eBay, it's more than the price of me buying the emulation stuff.
Yeah.
And the tools to fix the board I've got
together. Right.
So
right.
Well, I didn't say it was a perfect idea. Yeah. So I should fess up. We've got an 80s arcade in town that's got genuine 80s arcade machines in them. Some I had not remembered or not seen forever. They have about 310 machines, and they have a sign on the door, total number of machines, total being repaired, which is usually about 20.
Yes.
And the rest are good to go.
That's awesome.
And they've got some people lovingly maintaining and doing parts, and oh my God, the things they do to keep those things running.
Yeah,
it is hacking at its finest.
Absolutely.
Really,
Absolutely. Lee, my current restoration that needs very little at this point, 1979 Asteroids.
Wow.
Oh.
And guess what the 5-year-old plays every morning before she gets on the bus? Yes. Yeah.
I buy a clue?
Yeah. It ends in asteroids.
Well, I was going to make the comment that one of the challenges with emulation is you get some really weird timing issues sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, because they don't. It's not clearly a Raspberry Pi is not clocked at the same rate as the original 8-bit chips were. So
goes back to our random discussion about Python.
And goes back to this 737 Max 8. They're effectively creating an emulator for the previous version of the aircraft to deal with some of the hardware changes.
Oh man, nice
segue.
Yeah, that's really where I was going with this. Was that
let's talk about security.
Lee.
I had one thing. One of the things you guys reminded me of when they created the software system, it doesn't do the same things that other control systems in the plane do. The normal control systems, they have inputs or gauges on both sides of the aircraft, and they compare them and make a decision. And there's usually redundant systems, and if one's way off, the pilots say, hey, let's not go with that one, turn that one off. The control system they got for the 737 MAX only looks at inputs on its side of the plane, and there's no off override system. So there's kind of two concerns there. And the author gets into some of the fragility of some of the measures on the sides of the plane. You're thinking, Why the hell would you only trust one of them?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's true. I wanted to talk about some AV gear. And Tenable actually, its research team is cranking out some awesome research. They found 15 flaws in wireless presentation systems while investigating the Crestron AM100. They found that it shared code bases with a host of other wireless
What story is this,
presentation.
Paul? Because you
My
said
story-
wireless. And
My story number 2, in my experience, Larry, even wireless aside, AV gear just lacks those security controls. I think
Oh my God, yes.
that connectivity, right, that they provide for AV gear really, I think, stem from the culture of why would anyone want to hack these devices, right? And that's the way they designed it without taking into consideration any security because they didn't take into consideration any threat modeling. Because their whole premise, I believe, this is my speculation, is why would anyone want to hack this stuff? Now, keeping up with the modern advances in AV as we do being a podcast video company, all this stuff is moving to software. Audio and video over the network is more and more becoming a standard. The emerging standards are gaining widespread adoption. Dante is already a very, very widely accepted protocol for audio over the network. Nutex NDI has, I think, something like over 1,200 vendors and products or something that support NDI, and that carries audio and video over the network. So here's yet, similar to industrial control systems, a essentially communications protocol, right, or protocol that's traditionally been over analog and not connected to anything digital or the network. If it's digital, it may not be connected to the network. That is now
Modbus.
Modbus, right, now being sent over the network. Now, new protocols are being, it's not like it was serial before, but new protocols are being created for this. But this article kind of made me process all that because I did a ton of research recently about, like, and mapped out our roadmap for, getting to these places on the podcast where there's no analog and USB devices and HDMI capture. I'm like, how awesome, like the technology to be able to say, I spin up a VM and all its audio and video is sent over the network. I'm like, can we get there, please? So I can have one big honking friggin' VM server rather than, probably 6 systems now that have to be physical systems with audio and video capture and sending devices. The video card, right? The HDMI capture, and then the audio device, which is in and out audio, are all 3 separate devices plus the computer.
And they have to be hardware. Like, why can't
they
we
have to
virtualize
be hardware?
this?
But I'm like, audio and video is just like
This is a this is a pipe.
it's a pile of ones and zeros for crying out loud at the end of the day when it's digital.
We're
So
all just a pile of ones and zeros.
that's right.
This reminds me of very much the. I was going to teach the wireless class in its previous iteration where we talked about injecting keystrokes with a software-defined radio into the receiver of the little presentation remote. And I was under the impression that at one of these classes I was going to be teaching it in a skiff, meaning I couldn't bring any wireless gear in, but they were going to hand me one of these little presentation remotes where I could advance my slides, and that was the only wireless gear that was allowed, type of thing. And I'm saying to myself, oh, this is going to be effing fantastic when I get to this slide, when I say we can now use this little presentation remote receiver to inject keystrokes in. And I can see that I'm going to get this goddamn thing taken away from me, and I'm going to have to go and touch the laptop every time.
Yeah, it's going to suck.
So.
Oh, yeah. I have not had to teach in one of those secured facilities.
I have not yet. I was really close, though.
Yeah.
So
I don't have any magic clearances. So.
Me either.
Just trying to not be philosophical. Go ahead.
There was another story that I wanted to hit, and it was one by somebody that I see is really becoming amazing at this, and because also we shared a story, which was Johnny's story, which was the Cartoon Network worldwide was hacked for their streaming service.
This is the Weather Channel was hacked.
Well, the Weather Channel was denial of service, so they couldn't get their feeds. But
yes, you're correct.
The
Cartoon. But I thought they. So what they played was just a backup. Was just like a like off air kind of thing. Yeah.
But the Cartoon Network, their worldwide media streaming for all the various countries got hacked to replace all the video content with that of a Brazilian stripper.
So is that like the scene in Hackers where they're hacking the thing that's swapping out the tapes?
That's what it reminds me of.
Acid burn and Zero Cool.
Zero Cool. The other one that it reminds me of is the Max Headroom incident.
Yeah.
With the RF hackers from the Midwest. And there was a story on that not that long ago about they may have actually figured out who may have been involved with overriding those signals and so forth.
Digital billboards, similar kind of thing, right? You're basically hacking the broadcast mediums.
Yep.
Radio stations have been victim to that.
Yep.
Sometimes by my own hands on pen tests.
Yes. I know of which one you speak.
Yes.
Yes. I may or may not have been involved in setting up some of those systems back in the day.
Yep.
And
that's really cool.
You pen tested them so many years later.
I mean, the nice part about the internet is if you want to see Brazilian stripper videos, you can go to a site and probably watch those.
Yep, and you could even go to the site that you don't expect them to be on, such as Cartoon Network.
Just easy to find Brazilian stripper videos.
Yeah, so I thought that was amazing.
It's really awesome. Let's see. Try to not be philosophical. And go to proof of concept exploits for old SAP configuration flaws. Get this. And the way the way I phrased it was, according to Onapsis, shit's going down. That basically sums up this story. Like, Onapsis is basically like, if this were drunk history, like, you'd see the Onapsis people and their mouse, and I'd be like, shit's going down with this SAP security, right? So in 2005, SAP released a security note providing instructions on how you can set up ACLs for the message server. 4 years later, there was another security note on how to properly configure an access list for gateway. Then in 2010, there was another security note reinforcing the importance of properly configuring the message server ACL. However, Onapsis, of course, a company that has been a sponsor on this show previously, lots of friends that work there.
Yep. Still,
they did an interview at Black Hat with JP. It's just
awesome.
Amazing. So they discovered that many organizations have still failed to properly configure their installations. Now, the company warned last year that most SAP systems were still vulnerable to attacks due to these misconfigurations that were defined as far back as 2005. Exploits designed to target improperly configured systems were made public for the first time last month by two researchers who had a session on SAP configuration architecture issues at OPCDE Cybersecurity Conference in Dubai. And what Onapsis is saying is basically like, we told you this shit was broken.
Told you so.
In 2005. We told you that shit was broken 40 years later.
Screw you guys,
and then,
I'm going home.
Like, after that in 2010, we told you again, and you still didn't listen. And now look, these really smart people, they've got exploits. They're releasing them. And the moral of the story is the shit's going to go down. And I agree.
Exactly. What are we, 14 years on? I mean, shit.
Right?
The shit's going to go down. It's going to get heavy.
It's going to get
If
heavy.
I implement that, I could break something. Something might not work.
It's going to be heavy. That's what they're saying. They're rapping like Cypress Hill. And, yeah.
See, I can hang.
You should listen to the folks at Onapsis, and the world will be a better place, essentially. That's what it boils down to.
They were trying to tell you something.
Yep. They're totally going to clip that segment right there. And please do clip that segment and use that.
Yes.
That would be epic.
Yes.
Yeah, it would.
Speaking of philosophical stuff, my story number 2. Cisco released some critical security issues with their Nexus switches and a few others as well.
I saw this headline as like service providers got some stuff to patch.
Nexus switches and Firepower firewalls. I don't know about the Firepower firewalls, but Nexus switches absolutely in data centers for
like big data centers that run the internet kind of data centers.
Mid to
you're right.
Mid-size.
Yeah, Nexus is. I misspoke. Yep, Nexus is more. Not so much backbone of the internet,
No.
but
Yeah, no,
large,
this
like very large networks.
Yeah, mid to large organization, because that was their replacement to the 5900 series.
Yep.
Which is their
No,
Nexus.
6500.
6509.
Yep.
Yeah, the 6509.
6509.
Yeah. Nexus 9000's it's a badass, very high performing data center switch. For them to have vulnerabilities, if it was my data center, I'd be super, super nervous.
Even better. So you'd also be nervous because CVSS gave it a 9.8 out of 10 for hard-coded SSH certificates, which can be
Ouch.
extracted from their firmware.
And one could, you could quote me on saying this, that like a 9.8, like that's just an arbitrary score. It all revolves around your compensating controls, blah, blah, blah. If this switch is in your backbone and it's got a 9.8 that revolves around an SSH certificate that was installed on the box, it's bad. You need to fix that.
Even better, it's only exploitable over IPv6.
Which no one's paying attention to today.
I rest my case. Nobody disables and no one's paying attention to, so...
Ouch.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, man.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So I thought that one was like, oh, damn. Yeah. It's the Nexus 9000 series.
Oh.
Are you
The interesting thing about IPv6 is the adoption is growing.
It is.
I saw an article earlier today that said like it's a 25% penetration.
Yep.
And like Comcast is the number one IPv6 user. They had a table I found. And like number 10 is the country of Brazil in terms of IPv6 penetration.
Wow.
so they can get their stripper videos out to the world faster?
Yeah, that's right.
Faster, more efficiently.
Fully corruptible.
Yeah, because them 128-bit addresses go faster, I swear to God.
It's faster. That's what I'm. That's my theory.
And I'd argue
IPv6 is you heard it here first. IPv6 is faster
And
for Brazilian stripper videos.
And I'd argue that AT&T is a pretty big user, given my usage here in the U.S. when I travel so much.
You're looking at a lot of Brazilian stripper videos. Your usage of
No, because I travel a lot in hotels and I'm alone and I've got to look at Brazilian. Never mind. Because the thing that you were saying.
Let's talk about a sticky problem.
Speaking of which,
my.
Yes. You guys. The rest of my stories are mostly allowing us to yammer on about stuff, not so much technical stuff that we covered. So, is a sticky label the answer to IoT security problem? In the UK, they've got an initiative that's called Secure by Design. Cleverly zeroes in on 3 fundamental problems, meaning if you meet or have a product that is able to not have essentially these 3 problems, you get a sticker, just like kindergarten. Like, you get a sticker. Good job.
I voted. Yay.
Right. So number 1 is the IoT device passwords must be unique and not resettable to any universal factory setting. Number 2, manufacturers of IoT products provide a public point of contact as part of a vulnerability disclosure policy. Doing good so far. These are both really friggin' easy things to do that probably don't cost you as an IoT device manufacturer a whole lot of money until we get to number 3. Manufacturers explicitly state the minimum length of time for which the device will receive security updates through an end-of-life policy. And there we have a major issue in terms of economics and business.
No, you don't really. They can state it.
They can state it's true. Spoken like a true hacker. I can state, hey, 30 days from the release of this device, we're not going to provide any security updates. And you know what, Joff? What do they do? Do they take the sticker off after 30 days? Or they get a sticker, whatever. Whether it has a sticker or not, people are still going to go to the store and buy whatever's cheapest and whatever's coolest in terms of technology. And therefore, that is why initiatives like this fail miserably.
Yes.
Well, you got to give them credit for trying. I mean, they tried.
If they tried, we should give them a sticker.
And on it says, I fucked up. I fucked up.
Not I voted, it's I tried.
No. With a sad face that's crying.
Everyone gets a sticker. But it looks more like a Mr. Yuck.
When they screw up.
you get a sticker, and you get a sticker, and
Everyone
you
gets
get
a
a sticker,
sticker.
and you get a sticker.
Everyone gets
Because
a sticker.
looking at the Foursquare on the monitor, that works great.
Mhm.
Because you get a sticker, and you get a sticker, and you get a sticker.
That's right. Oh, there,
yes.
there it is.
Whoa.
There it is.
Oh.
Hey, get your
Oh.
finger out of my box. You
Well,
have
that's
to
just
be
scary.
watching the video to understand that joke. Okay. Julian Assange. I wanted to run a correction. What did I say in the beginning? Exfiltration.
He's refusing exfiltration.
Exfiltration.
Using exfiltration, that's right.
That's right. He's got
Sometimes
some great.
pronounced
You know
extradition.
what?
He's got a really good firewall.
Julian
He's got a
Assange's
fucking
egress
awesome
filtering. His egress filtering is friggin' top notch. No, he's refusing extradition to the U.S. And one of the things,
And
that
it's not so much that he's refusing it; it is that he's fighting.
two things, right? That we covered the story at the last minute on the last show, and rightfully so. Listeners called us out on it because by the time the show was posted and maybe they heard it, more stuff had come out. The news had just broke on that day, and we read a couple articles quickly, and we were like,
"That's the amazing thing about podcasts is that they can be time shifted."
Yeah. So the two things. One, we understand now why Julian Assange, or have some potential theories as to why Ecuador was like, get the F out, Julian Assange.
Yep. Because the cat said, "Clean my litter box." He said, "Like, I dare you to. What are you gonna do?"
He's essentially an asshat, and was a pain in the ass, disgusting. And there was rumors that he was blackmailing the president of Ecuador. So now, at least some really good theories. I think maybe perhaps better than when we came. I don't know about that, but more accurate theories. I don't know. I read it on the internet. Anyway, we have more theories. The other thing was that U.S. authorities did not go to London into the Ecuadorian embassy. Right. This was an extradition order. So currently he's being held. So the latest articles are saying basically he's fighting the extradition to the U.S.
Right. He's being held in a London jail.
He's being held in a London Belmarsh prison in southeast London.
Yep.
And in his extradition hearing, he stated as saying, "I do not wish to surrender myself for extradition for doing journalism that has won many awards and protected many people," is his argument for that. But that is an update on the Assange story. Thank you for our listeners for
and you know what?
pointing that
I
out.
think that makes sense. It's a smart move for him.
Yeah,
but
like what else would you? What are you going to do? Be like, yeah, you know what? Like I'm going to go to the U.S. and face really, really bad potential.
What is the other one? He's going to go to Belgium and face other really bad charges potentially for rape.
No, I think that was Sweden actually.
Sweden. Was that where he was from? Where is he from originally? Sweden?
No, he's Australian originally, but
okay, yep.
He was facing a
Germany. Was he in Germany? No.
He's been all over.
He's been all over.
He's been all over, but he was facing a potential rape charge in Sweden, as my understanding.
Right.
So he's hanging out in a London prison and trying to stay there at this point. So
again, I'll come back to like if he had just like done his thing and not pissed anyone off, he could be. They showed pictures of him with lobster.
Yep.
And now he's in a London prison. I gotta imagine there's a sharp contrast in his living conditions now.
Yeah, no lobster in prison.
I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it's not a comfortable cell.
No. What else do we want to cover? I covered the sticky,
what about
Assange,
we got some
the
other ones.
SAP.
Dell laptops.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dell laptop computers vulnerable to remote hijacks. And lots of I didn't get deep into this one. That there's some Dell support assistant that has some remote flaws available.
That's happened a few times in the past.
Yeah.
To multiple manufacturers.
I actually think that I've used. I won't throw Dell under the bus specifically, but pretty sure I've used a misconfigured service on a vendor supplied laptop to escalate privileges in a pen test in the past, maybe multiple.
It wouldn't surprise me, Joff, because
me.
In the history of the show, we've talked about the kind of like utilities or stuff that are included with your laptop that comes from a Dell or an HP or an IBM or whoever that makes the laptop. I don't know who they're employing to like write this software, but it doesn't get, in my opinion, historically, my analysis is that on scientific analysis, mind you, but doesn't get like scrutiny in terms of security. They're like, oh, we're throwing it in there. They're not charging separately for it, so it doesn't get the resources it needs.
Right.
It's on the laptop, and it's vulnerable. But the thing is, it's on every laptop in a probably pretty like long time frame.
And has a self-update mechanism, so every Dell laptop purchased in so many years has got this stuff on it. And so CVE 2019-3719, which was released by a 17-year-old security researcher in the U.S., which says the attack relies on luring users to a malicious web page, which would never happen.
Never.
Where JavaScript code can trick the Dell Support Assistant tool into downloading and running files from an attacker-controlled location.
All the more makes me feel a little better security-wise by moving to Linux. Because there's none of that.
Well, I mean, your browser could be completely tricked to going in.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying I'm not invulnerable,
but
right?
It's going to download a Windows executable that...
Those OEM issues can largely be solved. I mean, some of the OEM software from the hardware manufacturer, sometimes you have to install it if you want to do certain things, right? Other times, like even a clean install of Windows will help you in that sense. Putting Linux on it, right, may help in that sense as well. macOS, you're kind of stuck installing the operating system from from Apple and whatever.
And for better or for worse, I would argue for better.
Yeah,
because
I think we have not covered a lot of Apple.
Because Apple controls both the hardware and the software.
That being said, there were new exploit techniques for macOS released this week,
absolutely.
So it has its vulnerabilities as well. But this specific issue of because it's different in any other model other than Windows, right? The manufacturers are making the Windows-based laptop, maybe including Windows with it, and putting their software. And it's that software they're overlaying on top of it.
I'd also argue this moves into the mobile market as well. If you think about
it's awful in the mobile
where the
market.
carriers can push various applications to their devices on their network.
That you can't uninstall unless you're jailbreaking.
Unless you're on an iPhone.
Or unless you're on a Google phone, which comes from Google and doesn't include.
Agreed.
That's why I refuse to run. I love Samsung phones.
Yep.
They look like the thing with the screen that breaks. That's awful apparently, but like is really innovative tech.
Yeah.
That's really cool. But I won't run a Samsung device because they include all that other crap on it.
So I have an Apple device because I don't get any. One, I like it, and I'm in the Apple ecosystem. I've turned into more of the how you used to be back in the day. Whenever Steve Jobs hold up, I'll buy too. I like the Apple stuff, but I won't necessarily buy whatever I'm still on an old iPhone.
It's interesting. I went from that to like the other extreme,
complete opposite extreme,
where all my phones and tablets are Androided, all my computers are Linux.
And I have Android stuff, and I will never buy anything that requires me to put anything on it. Everything is from Google. So I have
Google.
I have Google phones.
know.
I have Google tablets.
I know.
And I will admit I have Amazon tablets.
Sure.
Because I use them for specific purposes.
So I bought a Huawei
Amazon.
tablet and violated that rule, and largely I just use it to like load Hulu and Amazon Prime.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I have the cheap Chinese shit.
Yeah.
For research purposes.
Yeah. Probably and the thing was it's the cost, right, of the Chinese stuff or whatever.
Go to Deal Extreme and you can get a 10-inch tablet for like $70.
Right.
Like,
the Google tablets are like super expensive. And the thing that I found when I did the research, totally off topic, but they don't get great reviews, the latest Google tablets at all, which is why I went with the Huawei tablet. But I mean, I totally know the Chinese are spying on me, so I just
you're watching Hulu on it. You use it for
take appropriate precautions.
Exactly. Like let Huawei see what I watch on Hulu.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And
on the Samsung front, when I was just lighting up this S10 a week ago, I was able to not install all the Samsung add-on stuff. I was not able to avoid installing all the AT&T bloatware, but I was at least able to unselect all the Samsung goodies. So, and if I had bought an unlocked phone, well, actually, there's a reason it's not an unlocked phone, but I could actually have avoided the AT&T branch of that conversation as well. So
But of course
I think they're hearing your complaint, Paul.
Right.
But of course, you're going to pay exorbitantly for that unlocked version without the AT&T crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so the story behind how I got this is that Samsung has been on my company to deploy more Androids, and so they offer me free ones on AT&T's dime to evaluate and test. So I kind of can't get super picky about the fact it's got the AT&T stuff on there.
No, I agree. There's the element of economics that plays into that for sure.
Yes.
I've been sticking with either Google or actually lately I got a OnePlus 6. That's a Chinese manufacturer, but it's pretty much true to Google and Android that they're very close to it. So.
I love my OnePlus 1. To give you a date on that one. Yep.
All right, come on, get to the next story, Paul.
Yep.
Security doesn't trust IT, and IT doesn't trust security, although this really was more of an opportunity to actually pick on a survey that's almost too easy to pick on. And when I read it, you guys, they're going to be...
Oh, my God, are we in the Wayback Machine? Are we talking a decade ago?
Oh, my God. All right, so here's the quote from the article. Story number 8. Most, as in 93% practitioners polled, say they face challenges. All right, I'm just going to stop right there. Raise your hand if you face challenges in your job today, regardless of what it is. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So I rest my case.
Next question.
Next. Securing
2 hands.
Securing new technologies is at the top of the list, with 48% of respondents saying it was an issue. So
wait, we have to secure new technology?
Has anyone had any challenges securing or had to secure?
Turn it on.
Who hasn't had to secure new technologies? Raise your hand.
Wait. So, dude, we're a company that is very backwards thinking about our security in that when you sign up to our newsletter, it doesn't have pictures in it because we send text formatted emails.
Right.
And not HTML emails. So have I had that struggle? No.
That's actually very responsible of you.
Yeah. So it also says that restrictive budgets were an issue, which of course begs the question of how you asked for more money. 39% said that. And a lack of understanding between IT operations and security was 35%. Yet the title for the article is that security doesn't trust IT and IT doesn't trust security, when it really should have been that security people face challenges at their jobs, because that was 93% of that. 80%. So let's go on to the next one. 80% of those surveys say digital transformation drives cyber risk security.
What?
Which makes me want to throw up in my mouth a little just verbalizing.
What did you say?
And 73% reporting they are now more dependent on software than they were 12 months ago.
So
what is that? I don't know what that is.
What's the point? I mean, isn't that contradictory to the rest of the article?
I don't.
All I can say is confirmation bias for the win.
I was hoping to get some information about IT and security, but instead I just anyway.
No, that's that's the great thing about statistics on the internet is that 73.487% of them are made up.
Yeah.
It's actually 77%.
You just pulled that right out of your...
So I guess we should in that talk about World Password Day, which was today.
Yeah,
did everyone know that today was World Password Day?
I did. So
did you put your password on the internet in light of World Password Day?
No,
it's probably already there. But
no,
some are.
It's not.
You know what? We should rename it to World Password Vaulting Day.
Yes. Or World No Password Day, where we can find better ways to authenticate other than pass. But see, I like this guy Frank a lot. So Frank Dixon, he's the research vice president at IDC, covers security. He says companies have relied on passwords for decades. Plus, they are easy and inexpensive to create. And I'll just stop right there with Frank's analysis. Just like hit the nail on the head as to why we still use passwords, because they're easy and inexpensive. And how do we apply security this for something to compare security and contrast it to something that's easy and cheap? It goes back to Larry's three-legged stool comment that he said on the show multiple times, right?
Yep.
And Frank hit the nail on the head with respects to passwords. So he said moving to a system where developers bake more security into applications slows down time to market and takes a lot more planning and effort.
Easy, inexpensive, secure. Pick two.
Spot on, right? Time
Yep.
to market and less planning and effort. Dixon also says the industry tends to miss really important point. Better security is about 50% of the equation. We tend to forget that we can create a better user experience by eliminating the password. A for the day, Frank.
Yep.
I don't know Frank, but I want to hang
I like
out.
that one.
Yeah.
I like that
Good
one.
job, Frank. We'll give
Sounds
him,
like we need to suggest him to come on the show.
I agree. Wholeheartedly.
Ooh.
He says smart things. We
That
should
could be
have
an
him on the
interesting
show.
conversation.
Totally agree. Now, with respects to passwords, my story number 14. There was this great title of a story in the beginning of the week. I was like, I want to talk about this on Paul's Security Weekly, and the title was Why You Should Say Goodbye to Password Vaults. Turns out we had to say goodbye to this article because the article was taken down even from Google's searching cache.
Yep.
At which point I stopped. We could go to greater lengths to find a copy of this article.
Said
but
article
at that point, it
n'exist-
wasn't worth it.
Said article n'existe pas.
Just pop.
Yeah.
Yes, let's get our French
I
for the
can
win
I
here.
can read French quite well, and that says the article doesn't exist.
It's gone.
And that was the really funny part is when I went to it and it gave me the error. It asked me to translate this page.
Yep. Now, that said, why you should say goodbye to password vaults is that one of our guys that in Guardians not that long ago talked about some tools against Windows in that we can capture clipboard.
Mm-hmm.
And we can start capturing clipboard in that what's happening when you're using a password vault many of the times is that you're going to the password vault, you're copying the password out of the password vault, which goes to the clipboard, which
Does the browser-
attacker could
Does
capture.
the browser plugin do that
I'm
to
not
autofill?
I'm not sure how it does that, but I would argue
But
that
a lot
it
of times
seems
you're right.
reasonable.
If it's not autofilling, I'm going in my password manager, clicking
copy
show
paste.
password, and I'm copy
Yeah,
pasting.
I was going to say, even if the password manager doesn't do it, a lot of people end up doing it anyway.
Exactly.
You know, I'm guilty.
Exactly. And now that in recent versions of Windows 10, there's the clipboard history. And there's been some tools to retrieve clipboard history that got released last week as well. Like,
Sweet.
now what?
Right.
Like, use a password vault. Your passwords are insecure. Use a password vault. How do we get those passwords from our password vault to that authentication system? Oftentimes, copy and paste.
I would still make the argument that you should continue using your password vault.
Yes.
I agree,
Why?
John.
Yes.
Why?
I agree,
Because you can
but-
change it to a super complex password and walk away.
And don't copy and paste that from anywhere. Keep
Yeah,
that
and
one in
try not to
memory.
copy.
Yeah. But now, that said, that becomes chicken and egg problem, right? You have to have access to that system to get that copy paste to use it on a system, as opposed to someone capturing it and having to, decrypt those passwords and so forth. So,
Yeah. I mean, the thing I like about password vaults, particularly the enterprise one, is I can share passwords with a team, and due to my self-encrypting handwriting, I don't have to worry about legibility.
You have your own cipher.
And I can also audit the snot about when somebody accesses it or tries to change it or whatever. But god dang it, I know somebody's going to put it in the clipboard.
I love that self-encrypted handwriting. Yes.
It's a gift.
Yes. Oh,
Lee, Larry, Choff, other stories?
I'm good.
I'm cooked.
So
Lee's got one.
I had one that I just I saw this morning that's not really a super story, but I was kind of impressed to see Kuna calling for data security legislation as a national issue. That's the Credit Union National Association.
Thanks, Lee.
Hmm?
I was going to ask, who's CUNA?
Yep.
So, because I'm a credit union director, I know things like CUNA. I was just impressed to see that the credit union industry is saying we need strong privacy and federal standards and stuff. I'm not so sure about their idea to circumvent state laws. That seems a little crazy, but the whole idea that they're trying to raise it up for consumers in an unexpected place says, I think the word's getting out about security in more places than we might think. So it kind of made me happy.
Yep. This whole thing about state versus federal versus city and or town law is really becoming interesting to folks, and not just from the cybersecurity stuff. You know, we talk about other rights here in the U.S. In that there's been lots of activity of people either not understanding or understanding how that hierarchy of those laws here in the U.S. works.
Mm-hmm. The last story I have goes with Joff's shirt, although, you know, hemp is largely misunderstood.
Yep.
As is CBD. But anyway, there is, this to me was really hacking of essentially the part of the First Amendment that addresses freedom of religion. And a Wisconsin church is distributing marijuana as a sacrament. So the church co-founder, Jesse Swark, considers it a religious sacrament and part of the worship at the Rastafarian Church in an old storefront near the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. Its members use and distribute marijuana freely. That's the only requirement for membership. Jesse's quoted as saying, "We all have to agree that we all break bread and use this one sacrament, cannabis. The church doesn't try to hide its marijuana usage either. They're open about it, even smoking right in front of the window for anyone to see." And this is hacking
ultimately this,
at its highest
Ultimately,
form.
this may reflect my T-shirt of Shall we play a game? Yes.
Exactly.
They're playing games with, and if you then delve into and start to read about the history of freedom of religion and how it's been abused, it's pretty fascinating. I've done a little bit of research on it, and I want to learn more.
I want to rephrase this: how it's been abused, or how it has been applied to hacking.
Mm-hmm. It's essentially hacking the laws, the social norms, the societal norm. Like there's a whole. It's
constitutionally, it's sort of constitutionally backed societal norm hacking.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we talk about this from that perspective, and then we bring this to the T-shirts. Joff, I had this conversation with some SANS instructors recently, in that some of them showed up in the instructor room at a large conference wearing T-shirts, going to teach for the day, and I'm like, "Are you guys slumming it for the day, or what's the deal?
What's going on?"
And the answer was, "Oh no, we totally can wear T-shirts if you can tie the T-shirt to the day's content."
It's hacking the norms. Yep.
This is day 6 CTF T-shirt.
There you go.
Ah, perfect. Yeah,
absolutely.
I like that.
I now have a T-shirt for every day of SANS class. Because
good for you, Larry.
Hacking the
You're
system.
my hero, Larry.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what's other than I think that the articles around marijuana are there's some that are they're so hilarious, like this one, right? But this one also tied to, like, they're essentially social engineering in working the system, which is essentially hacking, right? I mean, they're using freedom of religion for conceivably a purpose for which it was not intended. Yeah,
absolutely.
So I thought that was good.
Yep.
Hey, can I take
totally
us out?
expected that church to be in Berkeley.
Right?
Yes.
Right. Instead of
in the words of Method Man, marijuana is just nature's way of saying hi. Maybe that's a quote from the church. Maybe, I don't know. It's a quote from Method Man.
And Joff, I would love for you to take us out.
Joff,
all right,
take us out.
Thank you for joining us on Security Weekly. Over and out.